Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tara Lynn Grant. Tara Lynn Grant was born on June 22, 1972 in Michigan. She grew up on a farm with her parents and older sister. During her childhood, Tara enjoyed doing outdoor activities such as horseback riding and helping her family take care of farm animals. She was also very active in school sports, cheerleading, playing basketball and playing music in the school band. After completing high school, Tara decided to attend the University of Michigan. It was here that she met her boyfriend Stephen and married him after graduating. Tara, after graduating, got a good job at a large international company. Meanwhile, Stephen had been involved in politics as an assistant to a state senator. However, when the senator retired, Stephen lost his job. Therefore, he decided to work at his father's small tool shop. After 4 years of marriage, Tara and Stephen had a daughter, followed by a son a few years later. When their second child was born, they bought a new home in Monmouth County, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. Tara was successful in her career, but due to the nature of her work, she often traveled to different states and countries, leaving her with only weekends to spend with her family. As a result, Stephen had to take on most of the responsibility for the children. His father's store job and the children's care were difficult for him. So they decided to hire a full-time nanny to help ease the burden. After a short time, they found the right person. They hired a young German woman who quickly bonded with their children and took on most of the childcare. Because of her work, Tara only came home on weekends, which led to more frequent arguments between them. Tara expected that after her next promotion, she would be able to adjust her schedule to spend more time at home with her family, but when she was promoted, she traveled for work almost every day. This continued until February 14, 2007. When something unexpected happened. On Valentine's Day, Stephen reported to the police that Tara had been out of contact for 5 days. This was unusual because Tara was in constant contact with her family, especially when children were involved. Stephen recounted the incident as follows. On the evening of February 9th, Tara returned home from a business trip and said she had to leave earlier than expected, staying home for only 1 day. This led to an argument, and Tara began packing her things. As she left the house, she told the driver of a dark-colored car, "I'll be waiting down the street." From then on, Tara was out of contact and did not return any calls. The police wondered why Stephen waited 5 days to report the incident. Stephen explained that he was not worried at first because he thought Tara had just left for work early as planned and had not contacted her because they had just had an argument. However, he became concerned when Tara did not contact her family for an extended period of time. Normally, when she was on a business trip, she would call her 2 young children, but this time she did not contact them. Furthermore, Tara's boss called Stephen on Monday to say that she had not shown up for a meeting. This made him even more worried, and he was sure that Tara was missing. Stephen called Tara's parents and told them about her lack of contact with home. However, the parents thought that Tara just needed time off after an argument with Stephen. Previously, Tara had told her parents that her relationship with Stephen was having difficulties due to work, and they argued frequently. Therefore, her relatives thought that Tara just wanted to temporarily leave and would return home when she had stabilized. As time passed and Tara still did not appear, and she did not answer any calls, Stephen began to worry about her safety. He decided to contact the police for help. During the interrogation, the police noticed some suspicious scratches on Stephen. They asked if the scratches were related to the argument with Tara. But Stephen denied it. He explained that he often got injured while working at his father's store. After the interview, the police said they needed to search Stephen's home, and he agreed. When they arrived, the police discovered that all of Tara's belongings were missing from the home, including her papers and wallet, along with her suitcase. Stephen also gave them access to Tara's personal computer. The police checked it and found that there had been no bank transactions in the days after she disappeared. The police were surprised because Tara would have needed to pay for expenses if she had gone somewhere, such as buying a plane ticket or booking a hotel room. During the search of the home, the police found no signs of Tara's whereabouts after she disappeared. There was no evidence or clues. Therefore, the police decided to focus on determining what she had been doing and where she had been on February 9th. The area they live in is considered one of the safest in the country, and the local police department has little experience investigating similar disappearances. The police ask Stephen to take a lie detector test, but he refuses. Stephen insists that he would never harm his wife and becomes very emotional. The police then leave his home and consider their next steps. However, the next morning, Stephen contacts the police again and says he is willing to cooperate. However, a short time later, Stephen's lawyer contacts the police and says he has advised his agent not to cooperate with the police. Other than following the usual practice in such cases, they are unable to find any other leads. During the investigation, Tara's family, friends, and colleagues said they had not heard from her since February 9th and did not know where she might be. Additionally, her bank account had not recorded any significant transactions, although she needed to make some basic purchases. Police began to question Stephen and discovered that his driver's license had been revoked. However, Stephen continued to drive despite the ban. Police used this to arrest Stephen for driving without a license. After his arrest, Stephen claimed that the police were considering him a prime suspect in his wife's disappearance and refused to answer any questions. With the assistance of his lawyer, Stephen was released on bail and returned home. Police continued to investigate and requested Tara's cell phone records to gather more evidence. On the day Tara went missing, she made one last call. It was from the airport, in which she told Stephen that she would be home soon. Stephen then called her repeatedly, but all the calls went to voicemail. The police listened to these recordings and found that Stephen asked Tara to answer or call back. He claimed that Tara did not care about the children and asked her to come home for the children. However, Tara's cell phone was turned off and was last connected to a cell tower near her home on the evening of her disappearance. It is worth noting that the police did not find any incoming calls to Tara at that time, although Stephen said that someone had called her before she left the house and said that the person would be waiting for her on the street. Stephen was really worried about his wife and at the same time angry at Tara's actions of abandoning their children. Although the police were investigating him, they could not find any new traces. Stephen still refused to cooperate with the police, accusing them of wasting time suspecting him instead of looking for Tara. During this time, Stephen actively appeared in the media. Tara's mysterious disappearance attracted a lot of attention from many people, and in front of the camera, Stephen begged her to return home safely. When the company that Stephen and Tara hired the nanny learned about the case, they decided to send the nanny back to Germany. Before leaving, the nanny reported to the police about her working hours at their house. The nanny said that on the evening Tara came home, she went to a bar with her friends. When the nanny returned home, she met Stephen, who seemed sad and said that Tara had just left home. Although Stephen refused to cooperate with the police, he hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent, to investigate the case. However, this investigator also failed to find Tara. The police decided to change their approach and contacted the nanny agency that employed Tara and Stephen. They discovered an important piece of information. Before hiring the German nanny, they had a total of 6 other nannies, but none of them had worked there long term. Police interviewed the nannies, most of whom said Stephen behaved strangely and unnervingly. They said he would rummage through their belongings, ask personal questions, and verbally abuse them. The police began investigating why the last nanny from Germany had a completely different description of her time with the family. They had only heard good things about Stephen, To clarify the matter, the police monitored the nanny's emails and phone calls. This led to an unexpected piece of information. The police discovered text messages between her and Stephen, which showed that they had been in a relationship. It was learned that the 19-year-old had been having an affair with him during Tara's business trips and that the relationship continued until she quit her job and had to leave the country. Although this was an important clue, the police could not yet conclude that Stephen was involved in Tara's disappearance. Therefore, they continued to look for other evidence. During the investigation, the police talked to Tara's relatives and friends and found that most of them did not like Stephen because of his strange behavior. They believed that Stephen wanted to control Tara's every move and often caused conflicts with her family. The police also found another important piece of information. Stephen's ex-girlfriend, whom he had dated before meeting Tara, contacted the police and revealed something surprising. According to her, Stephen contacted her again a few months ago, and their conversations gradually became intimate. Eventually, Stephen expressed his desire to start a romantic relationship with her, even though they were both married to other people. Stephen also complained about Tara and her frequent absences. He suspected that she was cheating on him with her boss. To verify this, he installed tracking software on her computer, allowing him to read her messages, but he found no evidence of Tara's infidelity. This information made the police even more suspicious of her husband's involvement in Tara's disappearance. However, the police still needed more evidence. Since it had been several weeks since Tara went missing, they began to consider the possibility that she was no longer alive and began an extensive search for her body. Police, along with volunteers, began searching the area around Tara's house and a large park nearby for several miles. However, the search lasted for several days and still yielded no results. But everything changed on February 28th. A woman walking in the park discovered something strange under a tree along the path. A plastic bag was covered with branches and snow, but it was clear that there was still something inside. Therefore, she decided to examine the bag closely. When she looked into the bag, she discovered rubber gloves and metal fragments along with a dark red substance at the bottom of the bag. She called the police to report the incident, and she decided to keep the bag and turn it in to the police. Police suspected the dark red substance could be blood, so they sent the bag to a lab for testing. However, due to the large workload, experts said the DNA analysis could take up to 2 months. In the meantime, experts have tested the bag and confirmed that the dark red substance is indeed human blood. The police focused all their efforts on the area where the bag was found, mobilizing all resources to investigate. Meanwhile, Stephen did not participate in the search. Instead, Stephen spent his time giving an interview to a news channel, giving many suspicious answers. Stephen repeatedly criticized Tara for being away from home so often. He called her a bad mother and claimed that he shouldered most of the responsibility for taking care of the children. When the reporter asked about their financial situation and whether he was living off Tara's money, Stephen became angry. He insisted that he did not need a single penny from Tara. During the interview, Stephen accused Tara of having an affair but did not provide any evidence. He repeatedly criticized Tara. The police obtained a search warrant for Tara and Stephen's home. The police arrived at Stephen's home. At the same time, Stephen returned from an interview with a reporter. The police informed him of the search warrant for his home. Stephen opened the door for them and then called his lawyer. The lawyer asked the police if Stephen was under arrest. The police replied that he was not. Stephen then said that he was going to walk his dog and left. During that time, the police searched each room in the house. They eventually arrived at the garage and found a large green bin containing several plastic bags. When they opened one of the plastic bags, they found an unknown substance and women's clothing. When the police opened the other bag, they discovered that it contained human remains. After examining a total of 5 bags in the bin, the police quickly confirmed that they contained the remains of a woman. Police believed they had found Tara's body and suspected Stephen of being her killer. However, Stephen did not appear, so the police immediately launched a search for him to prevent him from fleeing or causing harm to others. Meanwhile, the police requested reinforcements to search the park for Tara's remains as more remains were still missing from the garage. Over 100 police officers from neighboring counties were called in to assist in the search, and their efforts soon paid off. A few hundred meters from where the bag was found, the police found another body part. Then they found the head. Due to the cold weather, the rest of the body was quite well preserved, helping the police confirm that it was Tara. The police continued to search and found some more body parts. However, in the evening, the search had to be stopped until the next morning. During this time, the police also tried to locate Stephen but were unsuccessful. They contacted his friends, and one of them revealed that Stephen had called him, informing him that the police were searching at Stephen's house and asking to pick him up on the way. Stephen's friend came to pick him up and took him home. On the way, he noticed that Stephen's behavior was very strange. He seemed scared, his hands were shaking, and he seemed very depressed. When Stephen arrived at his friend's house, Stephen said he wanted to see his children and borrowed a car from his friend. However, Stephen's children were at his sister's house in another state at the time. The friend agreed to lend him the pickup truck, and Stephen left. In order to track Stephen, the police requested his phone and credit card information. This helped them quickly determine Stephen's travel route. By monitoring his withdrawals and calls to his sister, the police realized that Stephen was on his way to see his children. Realizing this, the police immediately set out to track him. An unexpected event occurred. The police received a call from a German woman with whom Stephen had a relationship. The woman said that Stephen had just contacted her and confessed to killing his wife, Tara. According to him, they had argued that night and he became violent after Tara slapped him. In a fit of rage, Stephen pushed Tara and she fell to the floor, resulting in her death from head injuries. After this confession, the police no longer had any doubts about Stephen's guilt. However, they still needed to catch him. For hours, they searched the area along the highway leading to the neighboring state. They eventually found Stephen's car near the entrance to the national park, but he himself was nowhere to be found. The police searched the area, and after several hours of searching, they found Stephen using a thermal imaging camera. He was lying under a tree, wearing light clothing and in a dangerous state of hypothermia. The officers noticed that he was suffering from an unusual condition, often talking to trees and mumbling incomprehensible sentences. Fearing that he was in danger, the officers quickly airlifted him to the hospital. At that time, his body temperature was only 88 degrees Fahrenheit, but doctors were able to save him. However, he needed time to fully recover. While Stephen was in the hospital, he was charged with murder and the case was transferred to court. Interestingly, on the same day, Stephen's attorney refused to defend him. When asked why, Stephen's attorney gave a vague answer. A new attorney was then appointed for Stephen. Meanwhile, forensic pathologists began investigating Tara's remains. One of the most experienced pathologists in the country, who had worked on such high-profile cases as the JFK case and the JonBenet Ramsey case, was appointed as the chief medical examiner. After examining Tara's remains, the chief medical examiner concluded that Stephen's story did not match the facts. According to Stephen, Tara died of head trauma, but the investigation actually showed that Tara's cause of death was strangulation. When Stephen recovered, the police came to the hospital to see him and he told them what happened that night. The incident started when Tara returned and said she had to leave a day early. This led to a heated argument between the two. In a fit of rage, Stephen attacked Tara. She tried to leave, but he held her back. Tara defended herself by punching Stephen in the face, which angered him and he attacked her. The incident escalated when Stephen yelled at and strangled Tara. He then dragged her body down the second floor to the garage and put her in the trunk of his car. Meanwhile, the nanny returned home. To cover up his crime, Stephen told her that Tara had left him. The next day, he took the body to his father's workshop while making sure no one else was there. To cover his tracks, Stephen destroyed all of Tara's documents and personal belongings, then used a saw to cut her body into pieces. A few hours later, he packed the remains into plastic bags, placed them in a container, and returned home, leaving the body in his car for several days. He pondered how to dispose of the remains while creating an alibi for himself. He repeatedly called Tara and left messages on her voicemail, begging her to come home. Stephen took his son's sled and went to the park. There, he placed the container containing Tara's remains on the sled and began pulling it up a hill to avoid the crowded area. However, the rope he was pulling the sled with was not secure, and it slipped out of his hands. The sled began to roll down, the container tipped over, and the bags containing the remains spilled out. After picking up the bags, Stephen put the container back on the sled, and after a while, he found a remote place to bury the bags under the snow. He then left the park. A few days after he left, the police began looking for Tara, and the detectives announced that they would begin a search in the area of the park where Stephen had buried the bags. Stephen became panicked, remembering that the largest bag had been poorly hidden and could soon be discovered. To avoid this, he decided to move the bags to a safer place. Stephen went to the park, picked up a few bags, shouldered them, and carried them to his father's workshop, placing them on the roof. The next day, before going to the interview, he took the box from home, went to the workshop to carry the bags back to his garage. However, the next day, the police obtained a search warrant for the house. There, they found the bags in the box. When the situation became clear, Stephen confessed that he had not originally planned to surrender. During his conversation with the police, Stephen showed no remorse for his crimes. Instead, he often smiled and joked even as he described the process of hiding and disposing of the body. While Stephen awaited trial in prison, his children continued to live with his sister. This did not please Tara's family. Despite this, Stephen's sister continued to keep in touch with him, even feeling sorry for him and responding to jokes about Tara's murder. Tara's family eventually won custody of the children, but Stephen's family was still allowed to see them. In November 2007, Stephen's trial began. However, he did not deny his guilt. His new attorney then tried to get Stephen to get a reduced sentence. The attorney explained that Stephen and Tara's troubled marriage and Tara's frequent absences were the main reasons for Stephen's crime. During the trial, Stephen had lied about Tara's plans to come home a day earlier. Tara's sister, who had spoken to her before the murder, also confirmed this information. During that conversation, Tara told her sister that she would be home soon after that, as she did every week. There was no evidence that Tara had lied to her husband. Tara's boss said that Tara's relationship with the man was purely business, which was confirmed by their emails and text messages. The prosecution failed to prove that Stephen had planned the murder in advance. He had clearly committed the crime in a fit of rage, which could have resulted in a second-degree murder charge instead of a first-degree one. On December 21, 2007, the jury unanimously found Stephen guilty and he was sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison. Stephen's attorney attempted to appeal the verdict, but to no avail. He has since served time behind bars. But his story didn't end there. Tara's murder captured the attention of millions across the country, and Stephen clearly enjoyed it. While in prison, he began writing a book and begged to have it published with the help of his sister. They even discussed the possibility of turning it into a movie, and Stephen considered which famous actor could play him. In 2008, something else came to light. Stephen's children told their aunt that they had actually seen their father kill their mother that evening. They came out of the room after hearing screams and witnessed the whole thing. When this information appeared in the media, Stephen's relatives accused the children of lying and continued to protect him. That same year, it was revealed that Stephen's father, unlike other relatives, did not support him, could not live with what his son had done, and Stephen's father's body was found in his home. To this day, Stephen remains behind bars and will only be eligible for parole in 2058. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case, the case of Austin Harrouff. Austin Malcolm Harrouff, known by the nickname Golden Boy, was born on December 21, 1996, in Palm Beach, Florida. He was the eldest of 2 children and was born into a wealthy and respected medical family. His father was a successful dentist with many private clinics, and his mother was a leading pharmaceutical expert. The Harrouff family lived in a spacious, luxurious house by the sea. When Austin was 1.5 years old, his younger sister Haley was born, and the 2 siblings quickly became close. Austin's parents ensured that he and his younger sister received a good education and encouraged personal growth and creative pursuits. Austin excelled at school and had many interests outside of studying. He was passionate about playing guitar, wrestling, football, and acting in an amateur theater group. He saw himself as a creative and ambitious person. Along with his parents and sister, Austin traveled extensively, discovering new places during their vacations. Austin described himself as a cheerful and optimistic person with a strong imagination who excelled in academics and sports through perseverance. However, Austin also admitted that he was very shy, which sometimes made it difficult for him to communicate with his peers. Austin's personal life was interrupted at the age of 13 when his parents decided to divorce. His father moved out of the family home and into a new home with his new partner, eventually marrying her. Meanwhile, Austin remained with his mother, who also found a new partner and married him within a year. Despite facing the emotional challenges of his parents' divorce, Austin continued to excel academically and athletically. Austin always dreamed of becoming a doctor, like his parents, to help others. He was a high-achieving student and was admired by many of his friends. Austin's physical transformation during his youth was remarkable. He grew to be 6 feet 2 inches tall, developed outstanding muscles, and became strong. Austin's charismatic smile and gentle demeanor gave him an almost angelic appearance. However, he still struggled with social anxiety and shyness, which limited his ability to form relationships. In his personal diary, Austin wrote candidly about feeling isolated at school. His classmates called him a nerd and made fun of him, leaving Austin with few friends. Despite these difficulties, he still held out hope that his life would improve once he entered college. Austin looked forward to starting over, forging new relationships, and gaining independence from his parents. The important turning point came when Austin received news that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's prestigious 4-year medical program. This achievement promised to open the door to a successful and rewarding medical career, with the opportunity to continue his studies at any of the top medical schools in the country. Overjoyed by this news, Austin felt like his dream was finally within reach. As he prepared to enter this new chapter, his parents drove him to the college campus in late August. With excitement mixed with trepidation, Austin began his journey to becoming an independent adult, documenting his experiences in his first vlog. During his freshman year, Austin became deeply interested in bodybuilding and spent a significant amount of time in the gym, achieving notable results. He had developed strong muscles, but his success was partly due to steroid use. Austin had openly discussed steroid use in a YouTube vlog he had started in the spring of 2016. Austin had posted various videos to his channel, including discussions about sports and fitness, musical performances with his guitar, and philosophical musings on life. However, over time, his posts became increasingly disturbing. Austin began warning his followers about the dangers of steroids, claiming that they could cause serious mental health consequences and drive a person crazy. Austin had two distinct physical states: a normal state and a state he called crazy. Austin found it difficult to understand these contrasting aspects of himself. Austin had created videos where he spoke in different voices, as if he were other people. Sometimes, Austin's voice changed and he burst into tears for no apparent reason. Experts then reviewed Austin's posts and concluded that Austin was desperately seeking help in each post. As Austin struggled to connect with others during his studies, his blog had become his primary means of expressing himself. Over time, videos recorded him gradually becoming insane. His behavior became increasingly erratic, provocative, and aggressive. Some subscribers suspected he was using banned substances while recording, and they asked him about it in the comment section. Austin denied this, saying it was unhealthy and that he would never use banned substances. However, his behavior showed otherwise. One subscriber even speculated that Austin might have dissociative identity disorder. The sudden changes in Austin were not only manifested in behavior but also in appearance. When he returned home for summer vacation, his mother and sister were shocked by the changes they witnessed. During his year-long separation, Austin had experienced significant physical changes, including significant muscle gain, but these changes were more than superficial. Austin's behavior became increasingly strange. He would say nonsense and claim he didn't need sleep. At first, his family did not take this seriously, but as night fell, they realized he was serious. Austin declared that he would guard the house and protect his family from unknown threats, and he kept his promise, wandering the hallways until morning. Every hour, he loudly checked on his mother and sister, reassuring them that they could sleep peacefully because he was guarding them. The next morning, his mother made him talk seriously and asked him if he had used drugs. Austin admitted that he had tried many different stimulants over the past year and described their effects on him. He even used a powerful synthetic drug that caused hallucinations, rage, and could be fatal if overdosed. However, he promised his mother that he had stopped using and was no longer in danger. Despite her concerns, Austin's mother did not seek help from professionals. As a pharmacist, she thought she could help her son herself. She gave him sedatives and sleeping pills to help him relax and sleep after a long, restless night. However, Austin only slept for a few hours before resuming his vigil, informing his family every hour that everything was quiet and under control. Over several weeks, Austin's behavior continued to deteriorate, but his mother refused to seek professional help from psychiatrists and did not even inform his father about the situation. On the morning of August 13th, Austin unexpectedly visited an old classmate who lived nearby. The classmate was stunned because they hadn't seen each other in over a year and Austin hadn't contacted her. When she asked why he came, Austin explained that he had forgotten the year of his birth and was looking for answers. The confused classmate replied that it was 1996, after which Austin abruptly turned around and left without saying anything. Austin's behavior scared and puzzled the girl, so she immediately called Austin's mother and told her everything, asking if the boy might be using drugs. This prompted the woman to call her ex-husband, who was working in another state, and express her concern that something was seriously wrong with their son. Austin's father flew to Florida the next day and, after speaking with his son, suggested he voluntarily check into a clinic for a medical examination, which Austin firmly refused. Austin's father then had a heartfelt conversation with his ex-wife, and together they decided to send Austin for a mandatory examination and subsequent treatment at a drug rehabilitation or psychiatric facility. However, they couldn't do it in time. A troubling revelation followed. The next day, Austin's friends invited him to join them at the beach because of the hot and sunny weather. His mother insisted that Haley accompany him to keep an eye on her brother. Austin was excited about the outing but dressed as if he were going to the mountains instead of the beach. He wore a thick athletic hoodie, long pants, boots, and ski goggles. When his friends saw him, they were silent at first, then burst into laughter. They teased him about his outfit and asked if he was okay. Austin became angry and shouted that if they thought he was crazy, he would prove it by threatening their lives. Austin's friend didn't take him seriously but stepped back just in case. Haley noticed Austin was on the edge of a breakdown and decided to talk to him to calm him down. In a private conversation, Austin confided to Harley that he believed he was half wild animal, immortal, and had superhuman strength. This frightened her, but she stayed calm to avoid provoking him. At the beach, Austin behaved normally. He joked, laughed, played volleyball, and had fun with his friends. As evening came, they all said goodbye and went their separate ways. Austin and Haley walked to a small restaurant near the coast to meet their father and his current wife. On the way, Austin told Haley he wanted to test his immortality by crossing a busy highway directly through the fast-moving traffic. When Haley realized what was happening, she chased after Austin and physically pulled him away, urging him to hurry because they were expected. Austin agreed that they shouldn't keep anyone waiting and quietly followed his sister. During dinner, Austin acted strangely again, getting up from the table several times to go outside, looking around as if he was afraid of someone, then returning. He then decided to tell his father and stepmother about his belief in his immortality. When his father calmly suggested seeking professional help, Austin leaped up, shouted that he wasn't insane, pushed his father forcefully, and ran out of the restaurant. After leaving the restaurant, Austin walked several miles and eventually wandered into a neighborhood he didn't recognize. There, an open garage with bright lights caught his attention, and he headed towards it. This home belonged to an elderly couple, 59-year-old John Stevens and 56-year-old Michelle Mishkin Stevens. In the evenings, they loved barbecuing and watching movies in their spacious garage, which they had set up like a living room. Married for over 25 years, they had 3 adult children who lived independently, allowing them to enjoy retirement and each other's company. That evening, John took their dog for a walk while Michelle prepared for their usual movie night. When Michelle noticed an unfamiliar young man on their lawn, she felt no threat and even asked if he needed help. However, the situation unexpectedly took a turn. Jeffrey Pfizer, the Stevens family neighbor who lived across the street, was on friendly terms with them. Around 9 p.m., he heard suspicious noises outside. When he looked into the yard, he suddenly heard Michelle's agonizing scream. Without hesitation, he rushed to help his neighbors and saw Austin near the garage. Jeffrey tried to pull Austin away, but Austin was overpoweringly strong and knocked Jeffrey to the ground. As Jeffrey tried to recover, Austin stabbed him several times in the back and shoulder. Realizing he was overpowered and needed help, Jeffrey ran into the Stevens family house to draw Austin's attention away from himself. After exiting through the back door, Jeffrey headed to his own home. Once inside, Jeffrey realized Austin had not followed him but had returned to attack Michelle. Jeffrey immediately called the police and emergency medical services, reporting an armed attack by a stranger with a knife and stating that both he and his elderly neighbor had been injured. After contacting emergency services, Jeffrey fell silent, listening closely. He eventually realized no one was outside his door. It seemed Austin had remained at Stephen family's house, and now strange animal-like noises, resembling the growls of a wild beast, could be heard along with screams of terror and moans. It took the police about 10 minutes to arrive. But by then, it was tragically too late. The sight that awaited them was horrifying. 2 officers approached the garage with weapons drawn, only to be halted in shock at the doorway. There, in a pool of blood, lay the lifeless body of Michelle Stevens. The autopsy later revealed she had suffered multiple blunt force traumas to the head and a stab wound to the chest. A bit further inside, in the dim light, 2 more individuals were on the ground. John was reaching out, pleading for help with a strained voice. Above him, Austin was seemingly choking him. The officers demanded that Austin release the victim, threatening him with their guns. However, Austin showed no response, and firing was too risky due to the possibility of hitting both people. Instead, one officer drew a taser and warned Austin. Only then did he see that Austin was not just assaulting but actually biting John's face, holding his head and neck firmly. Beneath John spread a vast pool of blood, with a chunk of flesh missing from his left cheek. And his lip, nose, and ear were also mutilated and seemingly chewed off. John was immobilized, barely able to move, silently pleading for help. The officers shocked the attacker with the taser, but he seemed unaffected, continuing to tear at John's face with his teeth. A kick to Austin's face only made him growl loudly and bite into Stevens's cheek again. Reinforcements arrived, including a police dog that was unleashed on the frenzied young man. The dog latched onto Austin's arm, but he seemed to feel no pain, breaking free and injuring himself further. A powerful kick from an officer finally disoriented Austin long enough to handcuff him. At this moment, Austin claimed he felt unwell, possibly having eaten something bad, before losing consciousness and convulsing. Emergency medical teams transported 4 individuals from the scene. Unfortunately, Michelle could not survive, and her husband John passed away on the way to the hospital due to severe blood loss from stab wounds and the trauma from the attack. Jeffrey, who reported the incident, survived, but he experienced permanent minor motor skill impairment in his right hand due to nerve and tendon damage. Austin fell into a coma after mistakenly ingesting a substance from a garage bottle, thinking it was alcohol, which turned out to be a chemical. He suffered severe burns to his esophagus and stomach and spent several days in critical condition, but medical professionals ultimately saved him. Austin, the attacker, spent nearly 2 weeks in a coma. Upon regaining consciousness, he claimed to remember nothing about the events of that day. Gradually, he began to recall having dinner at a restaurant and an argument with his father, after which he walked away. Austin described seeing a ghostly figure that guided him through dark alleys and unfamiliar neighborhoods until he saw a light in the distance. The light came from a lantern near Stephen family's garage, where John was preparing a barbecue and setting out food. When Michelle saw him, she was startled and called for help. Austin admitted to hitting her several times and then pulled out a knife, claiming he would rid her of evil. At that moment, a neighbor named Jeffrey Fisher intervened, but Austin, thinking Jeffrey was a demon, attacked him with the knife. After Jeffrey ran to get help, Austin continued to assault the woman until she was lifeless. He then noticed a bottle, mistook it for alcohol, and drank about half of it. Soon after, he heard a dog barking and a man's voice. Austin claimed he couldn't remember what happened next, according to his own statements. Initially, there was speculation that Austin was under the influence of strong drugs, which could explain his aggression and lack of sensitivity to pain. However, hospital tests showed no traces of drugs, medication, or alcohol in his blood. This led to the conclusion that Austin might have experienced a psychotic break, acting without awareness of his actions. Experienced psychiatrists were tasked with determining the truth of this claim. The case of Austin Harrouf attracted significant media attention due to its extreme brutality and ambiguity, both in the courtroom and psychiatric care. The children of the murdered couple, along with the relatives of the injured neighbor, believed that the young man was pretending to be insane and claiming memory loss to be declared incompetent and avoid harsh punishment. Most people following the case shared this belief. The state-appointed psychological and psychiatric expert, Dr. Landrum, reported that Austin's mental illness led to an acute psychotic episode, resulting in the deaths of Michelle and John. However, the prosecutor argued in court that he did not believe the defendant met the legal definition of insanity at the time of the crime. It was suggested that Austin's mental health had worsened due to experimenting with various drugs, using steroids, and having trouble socializing with peers since school. However, at the time of the crime, he was not under the influence of any illegal substances or alcohol, as none were found in his blood, indicating that the reasons for his violent behavior were another reason. During a court hearing, Austin's father disclosed that their family has a history of schizophrenia, and he worried that his son might have inherited this serious illness. Additionally, Austin was suspected of having clinical lycanthropy delusion, a rare disorder. This might explain why he acted like a wild animal and seemed immune to pain, although no psychiatrist confirmed this diagnosis. After receiving treatment, Austin was moved to jail, but the case remains unresolved. He is still awaiting trial, and his lawyers argue that he is mentally ill. Meanwhile, the relatives of John and Michelle and Jeffrey have expressed hopes in interviews that Austin will be deemed competent and sentenced to death for his terrible actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carol Maltese. Carol Nicole Maltese was born on September 19, 1995, in a small province in Italy, to parents Fabio and Josephine. Her mother was of Italian descent, while her father had Dutch heritage. When Carol was just 4 years old, her parents divorced, and she remained with her mother. Her father moved back to the Netherlands, where he remarried and had more children. Despite her father's lack of support, Josephine chose to stay in Italy and raise Carol on her own. Carol and her mother lived in a small community called Sesto Kenda. Her mother worked multiple jobs to provide Carol with a good education and opportunities for a better life. As a result, Carol grew into a beautiful, kind, and sociable young woman with many friends and an easy rapport with others. She was an active schoolgirl who participated in sports, such as horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, and was an avid reader who could engage in conversations on a wide range of topics. As Carol entered her teenage years, she had many admirers and enjoyed being the center of attention. After completing her secondary education, Carol enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion. During her freshman year, Carol discovered she was pregnant after developing a romantic relationship with a young man studying architecture and design. The pregnancy was unexpected, and both Carol and her father were unprepared. Despite the challenges, Carol decided to keep the baby. In 2016, Carol, then 20 years old, gave birth to a son. The arrival of the baby significantly impacted her life. Due to financial constraints, she had to leave school to support themselves and their child. She relocated to Verona in search of better opportunities to provide for their family. Carol found employment as a sales consultant in a cosmetics and perfume retail chain when her son was 1 year old. Meanwhile, her boyfriend worked on projects from home and took care of their son. However, in mid-2019, Carol's life took another turn when she fell in love with Angelo. They began a passionate affair, secretly meeting in hotel rooms and exchanging messages at night. The affair lasted for about 6 months, during which they tried to spend as much time together as possible. But just before the new year, Carol's boyfriend discovered her infidelity and decided to end their relationship. Carol thought it was for the best that she was leaving, as she had already planned to move in with her new boyfriend. However, they faced a challenge. Angelo lived with his parents, and Carol couldn't join him with her child from a previous relationship. They decided to rent a place together, but their plans were disrupted, which left them jobless and unable to afford a home. Carol had to move into Angelo's parents' house and temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father. Carol struggled financially, but Angelo and his parents supported her as much as possible. She had to rely on them completely, unable to contribute to her son's care. To make matters worse, her mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which required expensive treatment. In desperation, Carol looked for ways to earn money from home to support her son and ailing mother. She turned to social media and created a YouTube channel, sharing her experiences of life in isolation. Although her content didn't attract much attention, her striking appearance drew comments, including some unwanted and inappropriate proposals. A subscriber suggested that Carol create an account on the adult content platform OnlyFans, citing her attractive appearance and potential for quick success. Taking this advice, Carol registered under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel and began posting intimate photos and videos. She quickly gained a large following and started earning a substantial income. As time went on, Carol's content became more explicit and bold and was appreciated by her fans. However, she keeps her work a secret from her boyfriend and relatives. This secrecy was short-lived because an acquaintance of hers discovered her account about 6 months later. Although Carol tried to justify her work as an art form that gave her financial security and personal fulfillment, her acquaintances did not accept it. Friends and acquaintances gradually distanced themselves from her, believing that her work was immoral and fearing that association with her would damage their reputations. Carol saw this reaction as prejudice and remained confident that she would achieve success and wealth as an adult film star. Carol's newfound popularity attracted the attention of adult film studios, and several directors approached her with offers to star in their productions. She soon accepted the invitation and participated in group photo sessions. Unbeknownst to her, her activities went unnoticed, and her boyfriend, Angelo, was shocked to discover that she was not working remotely as a designer as she had claimed she would. He felt lost and didn't know how to react because he had no plans to end their relationship. However, when Angelo's parents learned of Carol's profession, they urged him to end the relationship immediately, fearing she would bring shame to their family. At that time, Carol achieved financial stability thanks to her popular OnlyFans account and increasing salaries from film directors. In interviews, she expressed her intention to eventually complete her education and pursue a career in design or modeling. However, she increasingly loved her current job and was completely immersed in it. Despite her success, Carol faced constant moral pressure from those around her, who judged and tried to shame her. This led to certain psychological trauma. She defended her profession, calling it art, and supported women's right to choose a career without fear of judgment or social consequences. At the age of 25, Carol moved to Rescaldina, a small town in the province of Milan, with the intention of starting again. She planned to abandon her career in the adult entertainment industry and secure a job as a sales consultant at a perfume shop. However, this job of hers only lasted for a short time. A few months later, Carol met David Fontana, a 42-year-old local banker with a passion for photography, especially nude photography. They connected online, where David was searching for photo models for his projects. Carol reciprocated his offer, and upon their first meeting, they felt an intense mutual attraction. Despite being married, David pursued a relationship with Carol and they began dating. Their relationship involved photo sessions that often led to intimate encounters. David soon discovered Carol's past experience in the adult industry and encouraged her to resume her career, citing her talent. However, David's feelings for Carol were complex. He loved her, desired to possess her, and also enjoyed watching her in adult films. In March 2021, David divorced his wife and moved in with Carol, allowing them to explore their most explicit fantasies together. He assisted her in creating content for OnlyFans, a platform where she gained immense popularity. However, David took a share of the profits from their joint work. As Carol's success grew, she began receiving lucrative offers from foreign directors and studios for film shoots. David was a jealous boyfriend who would become annoyed when others showed interest in Carol in public or tried to flirt with her. However, He never interfered with her work as an adult film actress, treating it as a normal job that she felt comfortable with. On the other hand, after Angelo and Carol broke up, Angelo confessed that he had missed her and asked to get back together, saying that he would accept her profession and not restrict her freedom. Carol appreciated Angelo's efforts but revealed that she had already met someone else. Even so, Angelo and Carol continued to communicate. However, when David found out, he became angry, threatened Angelo, and burned his car and finally broke up with Carol. Angelo reported the incident to the police, who issued a restraining order against David, but ultimately found no evidence linking him to arson. As Carol's career took off, Carol frequently traveled for filming and attracted a large following. She was trying to buy a house for herself and her son and planned to leave the adult film industry to focus on raising her son. To achieve this goal, she started creating custom videos for fans, who would send her scripts and pay her to make their fantasies come true. This idea brought high profits to Carol. Carol and David continued to work together in film despite their personal separation. During a September 2021 film shoot, Carol met co-star Salvatore Galdo, and a romance blossomed. She and Salvatore eventually formalized their relationship, deciding to get married after taking the time to ensure they were both ready to move forward. As they planned their future together, they made a conscious effort to maintain their independence and keep their relationship private. They had learned from past experiences and wanted to approach their new relationship with a clear understanding of each other's needs and boundaries. In the end, Carol and Salvatore were able to build a strong foundation for their relationship, free from the entanglements of their past. They were able to move forward together, focusing on their shared future and leaving their complicated pasts behind. Carol's social media activity had slowed down significantly. Although new posts occasionally appeared on her account, she rarely interacted with anyone, keeping her responses brief. Her latest photos suggested she had recently gone on a seaside vacation, but she hadn't shared her plans with anyone. Everything was happening peacefully. But on March 20th, 2022, in a deserted area near Italian Borno, a passerby had made a disturbing discovery. He had been walking along a cliff when he had spotted large black bags of trash on a slope near a body of water. He had felt uncomfortable seeing garbage in such a beautiful location, so he had decided to throw it away. When he had approached one of the bags, he had noticed that it was unusually heavy. His curiosity had turned to horror when he had seen human fingers poking out through the tear in the polyethylene plastic. The man who quickly contacted the police, and when officers arrived, they found 4 bags with a human body that had been divided into 18 parts. Due to the extreme disfigurement, identifying the remains seemed unlikely. Forensic analysis showed that the victim was a young woman who had been deceased for at least 2 months, but the cause of death could not be determined. It was clear that the body had been stored in a freezer before being thrown off a cliff in a remote area, likely with the intention of remaining hidden for a long time. Upon impact, the bags tore, spilling some of the contents. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the victim's identity by removing any distinctive features, such as tattoos, although damaged remnants of these tattoos still existed. The skin in those areas had been severely damaged with burns from hot objects, cuts, and acid. Despite this, police were able to piece together fragments of the tattoos and compare them with a missing persons database. A breakthrough came when a news report about the body was broadcast, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Shortly after, a woman who worked in adult films visited the police station and identified the tattoos as belonging to a colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress knew the deceased as Charlotte, but did not know her real name. This new information was crucial, as it allowed police to establish the victim's identity and real name. Once her identity was known, it was revealed that she had become engaged to Salvatore Galdo, a colleague, shortly before her disappearance. However, Galdo had not reported his fiancée missing, which raised suspicions. He was detained as the first suspect, but he appeared genuinely distraught over his fiancée's death and puzzled as to why he was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had been in regular contact with his fiancée through messaging apps and social media, and he had proof of their correspondence. He claimed that Carol had caught sick and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When asked why he hadn't called to check on her, he said he had spoken with David Fontana, who lived nearby and had promised to care for her. Although Salvatore's story was unclear and unconvincing, his testimony led police to a second suspect who needed to be questioned. However, before police could search for David, he appeared at the station to report a missing person. This was a surprising turn of events. David had not been following the news and did not expect the body to be found so quickly. When he learned that Carol's body had been discovered and identified, he became worried. But when Salvatore was arrested, David realized the police would likely find him, as he had communicated with Salvatore by phone and fabricated a story about taking care of Carol while she had sick. When questioned, David appeared nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his relationship with Carol. He claimed he and Carol were close, but they had not seen each other in months and she had suddenly stopped contacting him. After hours of questioning, David finally cracked under the pressure and began confessing that he had accidentally killed Carol, claiming it had happened in early January during a filming session for a client who had paid a large amount of money. The script had called for him to tie and gag Carol, put a bag over her head, and brutally beat and torture her with tools, including a hammer. David and Carol had agreed that David wouldn't hit her too hard, but she would act like she was in a lot of pain. However, David claimed he had accidentally delivered a hammer blow and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag, he saw that she was about to die, but instead of seeking medical help, he had decided to end her suffering with one last blow of the hammer. But surprisingly, the investigation revealed that the mysterious customer was actually David, who contacted Carol using a fake account. He had come up with a revenge plan because Carol had wanted to leave him. At about 9 p.m. on January 11th, David had used a hammer to kill Carol. The next day, he had bought a large freezer using Carol's credit card, as well as a saw and axe from a hardware store, which he had used to dismember her body. David had attempted to disfigure her body to prevent identification by removing her tattoos and skin and attempting to burn and shred the rest. After murdering Carol, David stored her body parts in bags and kept them in a freezer for over 2 months. During this time, he deceived her relatives and friends by communicating with them through her phone and social media accounts, creating the illusion that she was still alive. By the end of March, David thought it was safe to dispose of the body and dumped it off a cliff in a remote area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or would have decomposed beyond recognition by the time they were discovered. However, the body was found just 2 days later, and authorities tracked David down within a week. The most puzzling aspect of the case is that none of Carol's relatives or friends reported her missing, despite her disappearance occurring nearly 3 months prior. They were all convinced by the messages and social media posts David had created, and even her fiancé, who thought she was ill, didn't become alarmed when she failed to answer his calls or visit him. If someone had raised the alarm, David would have been tracked immediately through the signal from Carol's phone, which he had kept with him the entire time. At the trial, David expressed remorse and claimed he loved Carol, stating that her death was unintentional. He also said he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Although this statement seemed implausible, the defense maintained that the incident was an unintentional act of violence. On June 12, 2023, David was found guilty of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation to Carol's son, Carol's mother, and the father of Carol's child, totaling €350,000. Notably, the court did not consider the manner of the killing to be cruel. and the dismemberment of the body was not deemed an aggravating factor. As a result, David may be eligible for parole in the future. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She has an older sister named Lynn. In the summer of 2010, Catherine met Rafael Novak, a 31-year-old co-worker, on a university break while working on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafael was an immigrant from Poland with a previous marriage and a son, had moved to England 4 years earlier seeking a better life. Rafael and Catherine started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site cafe, but soon progressing to romantic dinners. Rafael showered Catherine with gifts, took Catherine to movies, and went on walks with Catherine. As their relationship deepened, Rafael shared his past and reasons for moving to the UK with Catherine. Rafael's trustworthy nature allows her to open up completely to him. Within a few months, Catherine introduced Rafael to her parents, who welcomed him into their family and hoped for Rafael and Catherine's future happiness. Soon, Rafael and Catherine began planning their wedding. Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University in 2011 and secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. Her career progressed quickly, helping her have good job opportunities. Catherine is smart, highly educated, and has good interaction skills with others. She shows genuine interest in her co-workers' problems and cares for those around her. Her kind demeanor and radiant smile have earned her the admiration of her colleagues, who view her as a young leader. Catherine's career was advancing swiftly, and her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Rafael, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Although they were financially secure, they opted to take out a mortgage, securing insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. With their youth, successful careers, and love for each other, it seemed they had all the ingredients for happiness. However, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a turning point in their lives, changing everything forever. On September 12, 2012, Orlando, a local resident, was driving home after a night shift at the gas station. He is in a hurry to take his daughter Maria to kindergarten as he promised his wife. While driving, he noticed black smoke coming from a nearby parking lot after turning a sharp corner. Smoke billowed from a car engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped and tried to get a closer look but couldn't due to the intense fire. When firefighters arrived 4 minutes later, the car was completely burned out. The police cordoned off the area to keep onlookers away. The location was relatively deserted due to the early hour, and there were no witnesses to the incident. Upon investigation, a charred body was found. The police needed to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. There were no signs of a car accident or any evidence of another vehicle being involved. The police initially suspected that the car may have caught fire due to a malfunction or self-ignition. A thorough investigation was conducted, involving multiple expert analyses. The remains were sent to a forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death. The police also examined fragments of the burned vehicle to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. They quickly identified the deceased as 23-year-old Catherine Wells Burr. On the same day, Rafael Novak filed a missing persons report for his girlfriend, Catherine. According to Rafael, he left for work at 5:30 a.m. while Catherine was still asleep. When she failed to show up for work, and Rafael couldn't find her at any of her relatives' homes, he contacted the police. The investigation involved interviewing the victim's family, including her parents and sister, as well as Rafael, her colleagues, and friends. By gathering information about the last days and years of Catherine's life, the police were able to reconstruct the events leading up to her tragic death. The investigation into Catherine's disappearance continued to uncover shocking details about her life with Raffel. As the truth began to emerge, it became clear that their relationship had been built on lies from the start. Raffel, a 29-year-old man from Poland, had left his wife and child behind to escape his debts. He moved to the UK, where he met Anna Levick, with whom he had a long-term relationship starting in 2008. When Raffel met Catherine, he initially maintained relationships with both women. However, he eventually chose Catherine, believing she offered more stability and financial security. Catherine, unaware of Raffel's true intentions, genuinely desired a happy marriage and family with him. Meanwhile, Raffel was secretly planning to kill Catherine, intending to use the life insurance payout and the large house they shared to fund a new life with his mistress, Anna. The murder was carefully planned and executed with exceptional cruelty. On the day Catherine went missing, Raffel waited a few hours before reporting her disappearance to her boss, pretending to be frantically worried about her whereabouts. He feigned panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives, claiming she had been receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. When Catherine's car was found missing and she was not at her parents' home or her own, Raffel's fake concern led Catherine's family to contact the police. Raffel recounted that the evening before her disappearance had been normal evening. Raffel and Catherine went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, watched TV, and went to bed together. Catherine seemed calm. However, a thorough investigation revealed that her death occurred earlier. She was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while asleep. Her body was placed in the car, driven a short distance, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Raffel Novak had a solid alibi, as he was at work from 5:30 a.m. He claimed Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Raffel was still at home at 1:30 a.m., which significantly altered the case's direction. As a result, Raffel Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wells Burr's murder. The evidence allowed for Raffel to be detained pending further investigation. Raffel claimed that Catherine was being stalked, which had caused her significant distress. However, during the investigation, it was discovered that Catherine had a secret online life. She had accounts on several adult websites, where she shared intimate photos and engaged in flirtatious conversations with men. A letter from a secret admirer was also found. Despite attempts to mislead the investigation, evidence was uncovered that proved Raffel's direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Notably, Raffel had a motive to kill Catherine. Investigators found that he had been in continuous communication with Anna Legwinowicz, and they had met regularly over the past few months. Furthermore, it was discovered that Raffel had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had both taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000. Raffel and Catherine were the sole beneficiaries of each other's policies, meaning they would receive the payouts in the event of the other's death. The main motive behind Catherine's death and the burning of her car to mislead the investigation was found to be a large life insurance payout. On the day she went missing, Catherine sent a message to Anna's phone. Additionally, security cameras showed Anna and her uncle filling a gas can at a gas station a few days before the crime. This new information brought a third person into the investigation. Anna Legwinowicz, 32, and her uncle, Tadeusz Dimitrison, 38, along with Raffel Novak, are suspected of being accomplices in a premeditated crime and arson to cover up evidence. The crime was carefully planned by them over several months. They created accounts on adult websites, uploaded doctored images of Catherine, and created chats with various men to mislead the investigation. When faced with undeniable evidence, Raffel and Anna couldn't deny their involvement any longer and began blaming each other. Raffel claimed that Anna, driven by jealousy, planned and carried out the crime to eliminate Catherine. In contrast, Anna accused Raffel of committing the crime out of greed, seeking to secure the insurance payout for the house. To avoid detection, the conspirators forged much evidence related to Catherine. They created fake profiles about Catherine on dating websites, portraying her as a promiscuous and highly sexual woman. Also, to cover their tracks, the conspirators burned Catherine's body and created a fake story about her. They invented a fictitious lover, and they believed that he might be responsible for Catherine's death. One of the conspirators even sent a text message from Catherine's phone to this fictitious person, suggesting that she was on her way to meet him. However, forensic experts discovered that when the fire broke out, Catherine was only wearing her favorite nightgown, not an appropriate outfit to meet someone. Despite the evidence, Raffel refused to acknowledge his involvement in Catherine's death. Instead, he told Jane, Catherine's mother, that her daughter was receiving threatening emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could. Raffel also claimed that Catherine had spoken of taking her own life. In a shocking display of deceit, Raffel allowed Catherine's parents to comfort him, believing he was also mourning the loss of Catherine he loved. Raffel's acting was incredibly convincing. After Catherine's death, her mother, Jane, was so taken in by his performance that she hugged him and allowed him to call her mom. Jane explained that in the early stages of the investigation, the police viewed Raffel more as a witness than a suspect, so she decided to offer him her full support. Her reasoning was that if Catherine had loved him that much and he was considered part of their family, then he deserved their support. The trial, chaired by Justice Sharp, began and the jury heard that Raffel and his two co-defendants stood to gain a significant amount from Catherine's death. They hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that when police found Catherine's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12, Raffel showed no emotion. Anna Legwinowicz frequently shook her head and laughed in court when it was suggested she was responsible for the crime, but refused to testify. Tedevs also chose not to testify in his defense. The judge, Justice Sharp, told the defendants the murder was a horrific and merciless crime. The defendants showed no emotion during sentencing. The judge described Anna Legwinowicz's behavior as deceitful, manipulative, and cruel, and stated she played a significant role in the crime. He also told Tedevs that the murder was committed for gain, with many aggravating circumstances and no mitigating ones. The judge expressed deep sympathy for Catherine's parents, who had no idea that Raffel Novak's charming facade hid a monster. Raffel's actions were driven by financial gain, as he had no emotional ties to Catherine. Catherine's mother stated that the brutal and calculated manner of her daughter's death would haunt them forever. She regretted not having the chance to say goodbye or express her love, and now considers Raffel an evil person who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they had welcomed Raffel into their home, treating him like a son, only to be betrayed by him. During the trial, Raffel Novak became emotional in the witness box. He denied any involvement in the death of his girlfriend, Catherine Wells Burr. Raffel claimed everyone was blaming him for a crime he did not commit. However, the court heard that Raffel showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12 last year. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells Burr, testified that after his initial release from police custody, Raffel asked for a steak dinner and didn't even mention Catherine. Jane Wells Burr stated that her daughter's fate was sealed when she and Raffel bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believes that in signing the contract, Catherine also signed her own death warrant. Ultimately, the court found Raffel Novak guilty of suffocating Catherine with a pillow while she slept. He had conspired with his secret lover, Anna Legwinowicz, and her uncle, Tadeusz, to claim a £123,000 life insurance payout and a share of the house. Anna and Tadeusz had transported Catherine's body in her car to a remote location and set it on fire. Raffel and Anna were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years, while Tadeusz received a 27-year sentence. After the verdict, Catherine's parents, Philip and Jane Wells Burr, advocated for stricter immigration laws. They believed that if the UK had more stringent immigration rules, like the US, Raffel Novak would not have been allowed entry. Raffel had previously been convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland. Philip and Jane, who divorced after Catherine's death, blamed the European Union for the UK's lenient immigration policies. Jane stated that the UK does not thoroughly check people entering the country. She was unaware of Raffel's previous assault charge in Poland and believes the government needs to prevent individuals like Raffel from freely entering the country. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother paid tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful, determined, and hard-working individual who earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. Catherine's family expressed their devastation and loss, stating they were proud of her accomplishments and had no idea how to move forward without her. They believed she had great potential and a promising life ahead, but it was cruelly taken away from her and her loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Michelle Young. Jason Young was born in 1974 in Brevard, North Carolina. Jason grew up in a typical family. After completing high school, he attended the prestigious State University in Raleigh, the state capital. Following graduation, he secured a job as a salesman at a large retail chain. Jason proved to be a valuable and reliable employee, but his friends described him as inconsistent and unpredictable in his relationships with women. He had a reputation for being a womanizer, often changing partners. Michelle Young was born in February 1977 in New York. She was raised in a close-knit family with her younger sister Meredith and their devoted mother Linda. Linda played a significant role in Michelle's early life, nurturing her passions and talents from a young age. Michelle's interests in law and economics were evident from her school days, and she dreamed of pursuing a career in this field. Michelle's academic journey led her to apply to several universities after high school, eventually gaining acceptance into a top university in North Carolina. There, she pursued her master's degree in economics. After completing her education, Michelle secured a prestigious job at a leading accounting firm in the state, rapidly establishing herself as a skilled professional. She achieved financial stability, was able to support herself fully. A chance encounter at a bar on Michelle's birthday, when Jason accidentally spilled a cocktail on her, he immediately apologized and offered to buy her another. This kind and thoughtful act caught Michelle's attention, and they began chatting. As they talked, they discovered that they had a lot in common. They both went to the same college, although Jason graduated 3 years earlier. Their casual conversation quickly turned into a romantic relationship, and they began dating. Although they had deep feelings for each other, they had no plans to get married or move in together. At the time, Jason still lived with his parents in Brevard, while Michelle lived in Raleigh. They would see each other on weekends or during Jason's business trips to Raleigh. During one of their meetings, Michelle dropped a bombshell: she was pregnant. This news came as a shock to both of them, as they were not yet ready to become parents. Jason and Michelle were young and focused on their careers, with no immediate plans to start a family. However, when Michelle became pregnant, she decided to keep the baby after some initial hesitation. Jason took a month to come to terms with the situation and then relocated to be closer to Michelle. After a few months, they got married, but it wasn't due to love or the pregnancy. Instead, It was because Michelle lacked health insurance, and the cost of childbirth would have been prohibitively expensive. Marriage provided a solution to this financial burden. Their daughter, Cassidy Elizabeth, was born in the spring of 2004. Michelle threw herself into domestic life and family responsibilities, with the help of her mother and younger sister. Although Michelle's family was wary of Jason, they tried to avoid conflicts and accepted him as part of their family. Later that year, the young family moved into a large house in a quiet neighborhood. Michelle's mother, Linda, came to visit to help with housework and noticed a tense atmosphere in the home. Jason had a bad temper and often started arguments. Michelle tried to downplay these incidents and appear cheerful. However, she confirmed with her mother the true state of their relationship, which seemed ominous. When Cassidy was just 2 years old, Michelle found out she was pregnant again. She was nervous about sharing the news with her husband, but he took it calmly and even seemed happy. The family decided to visit Jason's parents in Brevard to share the news in person. They spent the weekend celebrating with relatives, and on Monday they left Cassidy with the grandparents for a few hours and went out to dinner to celebrate the event. As they were driving home, Jason, who was driving, overturned and the car went off the road into a ravine. They were left very frightened with a few scrapes and bruises, but their lives were not in danger. However, Michelle had suffered a miscarriage, so Michelle was very worried. Jason was surprisingly calm about the accident. Before the accident, during a business trip, Jason met an old college friend, Michelle Money. She had the same name as Jason's wife, Michelle. Jason told his wife about it. They decided to invite Michelle Money to visit their home, and she agreed. During her visit, Michelle Money began to complain about her unhappy family life. At the same time, Michelle Money kept complimenting Jason and telling his wife that she was lucky to be pregnant. Michelle was not worried about Michelle Money's behavior, but she genuinely wanted to comfort her friend. Jason and Michelle Money began calling each other every day and secretly meeting each other. Jason always justified his absence with business trips, and his wife could not guess anything. Things got complicated in the summer of 2006, when Michelle found out she was pregnant. Unlike her previous pregnancies, Jason's reaction was unhappy and cold. Michelle attributed his sadness to her previous miscarriage, still not knowing the real reason for his cold behavior. In November, with Michelle 5 months pregnant, Jason embarked on a 300-mile business trip. Michelle, who was pregnant, had a lengthy phone conversation with her best friend, discussing family problems and a heated argument she had with her husband the previous night. After the call, her husband left. Jason embarked on a 300-mile business trip. Around 10 p.m., Jason arrived at a hotel, claiming fatigue from his journey. However, instead of resting, he began to carefully examine the hotel's entrances, exits, and security cameras, planning a way to leave and return undetected. He was creating a solid alibi for a crime he intended to commit. Early the next morning, Jason calls Meredith and asks for her help. He tells her that he wants to surprise his wife with a piece of jewelry for their anniversary, but accidentally sent the order confirmation to their home fax machine. Jason is worried that Michelle will see the gift and ruin the surprise. Even though Meredith doesn't like Jason, she agrees to help him. Meredith arrived at her sister's house, using a secret door in the garage that only family members knew about and that was always left unlocked. The house was unusually quiet, but Michelle's keys, wallet, and important papers were still in the hallway, suggesting she hadn't left the premises. When Meredith went upstairs, she found the bedroom door wide open, but neither Michelle nor her daughter responded to her calls. When she entered the room, Meredith was met with a horrific scene. Michelle lay on the floor by the bed, her skull fractured and her body surrounded by a large pool of blood. The walls, furniture, and floor were all stained with blood, and tiny footprints were visible next to the body. Sadly, Michelle had been dead for hours. As Meredith rushed to call 911, she heard a faint noise coming from under the bed. When she looked back, she saw Michelle's young daughter, Cassidy, looking at her with a confused expression. Cassidy was unharmed. The little girl had witnessed her mother's brutal death and had spent many hours by her side. A forensic examination of Michelle's body later revealed a series of bruises, abrasions, and broken bones. Her teeth had been broken, and her skull had been fractured by a heavy object. A bloody pillow was found next to her body, with marks suggesting she had been suffocated by the pillow. The murder investigation revealed some crucial facts. First, nothing was stolen from the house, indicating that the killer's sole intention was to murder the Michelle. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry or broken locks, suggesting that the perpetrator had a key or knew about a secret door that only family members were aware of. Normally, Jason would be the prime suspect, but in this case, Jason seemed to have a solid alibi. He claimed to have checked into the hotel and not left until the morning, then attended a business meeting. Hotel records confirmed that he used a key card to enter and exit the room. However, upon closer inspection, investigators discovered several irregularities in Jason's alibi. A hotel employee found the fire escape open and propped up with a rock. When investigators reviewed surveillance footage to determine who had propped up the rock, they discovered that the camera had been deliberately disabled on the night of the murder. Jason's room was last recorded about half an hour after he checked in. The strange events continued. Later that night, a man resembling Jason stopped at a gas station between the hotel and the crime scene. When asked to show identification as required by the station's rules, he refused, paid with cash, and hastily left without waiting for his change. The on-call attendant identified Jason, but he denied any involvement, claiming that he had spent the night in the hotel room. His actions, however, raised suspicion. On the day before the tragedy, Jason had made more than 24 calls to his wife, Michelle, and 5 more to his mistress, Michelle Money, each lasting less than 15 seconds, suggesting he was in a state of panic. Notably, these calls were made outside the hotel, contradicting his claim that he had been in the room all night. Additionally, Jason was late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners and appeared distracted. While these incidents were suspicious, they did not prove his guilt, so Jason was able to maintain his normal life for nearly 3 years. He even won custody of his young daughter, which was a huge blow to Michelle's family. Jason's case was reopened in 2012 with new evidence. Witnesses reported seeing his distinctive white car near his home on the night of the murders. A child psychologist testified about Jason's daughter reenacting a disturbing scene with her doll. And Jason's former mistress Michelle Money revealed Jason's mood swings and violent outbursts, and that he had confided in her about his marital woes. This testimony helped convict Jason of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As a result of Jason's actions, his daughter, Cassidy, was left without parents. Her mother was murdered, and her father is in prison for the crime. Cassidy is now being cared for by her aunt and maternal. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal. Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal was born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid, to parents Diana Cristina Lopez Pinal and Juan Carlo Cayer. She has a younger sister named Valeria. Her family was wealthy and everyone in the family was very close-knit. But their lives hit a snag in 2013 when Diana's parents divorced. However, the father still visits his daughter regularly on holidays. In the summer of 2016, Diana, her mother, and her younger sister spent their vacation in the small coastal town of Apab du Carmel, a place they had visited many times before. The town, with a population of around 10,000, is a quiet and picturesque retreat away from the hustle and bustle of city life. On the evening of August 21st, Diana told her mother that she was going to meet her friends at Val-Inclin Park to celebrate the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. The park was close to their vacation cottage, and Diana often walked there. Her mother gave her permission to go. Diana spent a fun evening with her friends, she unaware that it would be the last time they would see each other. At around 2:30 a.m., she said goodbye to her friends and began her home. On the way, she ran into a friend, Paso de Ariel, near her favorite pizzeria. He was the last person to see Diana that night. The next morning, August 22, 2016, became a nightmare for Diana's mother, Christina. When she realized her daughter hadn't come home from the party, she grew concerned. Diana's phone was off, which only added to her worry. Without hesitation, Christina contacted the police and reported her daughter missing. According to Christina, Diana didn't have any serious emotional or mental health issues, despite her parents' divorce when she was younger. Police opened an investigation into Diana's disappearance, looking into the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Diana's disappearance is a mystery that investigators must unravel. Their first clue came from the last message she sent to a friend in Madrid via WhatsApp. In these messages, Diana mentioned a stranger who was stalking her and shouting strange phrases, causing her to feel scared. Unfortunately, these were her last messages, after which she stopped replying to her friends' messages. During their search, they found a black hair band along the road that resembled the one Diana was wearing that night. Although this was the only evidence found at the scene of her disappearance, it gave investigators a clue to work with. Diana's friends had no information about her disappearance. Additionally, there were no CCTV cameras in the area where she was last seen. The street was dimly lit and deserted, with only a few garages and an old nightclub. Although some people reported seeing Diana get out of a car with 3 men and then get into another car, but these were not corroborated. The investigation into Diana's disappearance considered 2 primary theories. One possibility was that she was kidnapped by someone she knew. The other theory is that she was the victim of a random attack by a mentally unstable individual. Diana's mother proposed a third theory, speculating that her daughter might have been taken away by boat. New information emerged when Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend revealed that she had met a man from Morocco and purchased hashish with him. However, this detail only added to the complexity of the case. The media reported that the clothes Diana wore on the evening of her disappearance had been found, but her mother disputed it, saying it was not true. Several factors suggest that Diana did not leave voluntarily. Her credit cards and identification were still in the house. It suggests Diana's disappearance was forced, but the case remains unsolved and remains a mystery. After Diana vanished, the media reported on a fight between Diana and her mother that had occurred just days before. The press claimed that Diana had a nervous breakdown and needed medical attention. Her sister Valeria was also hospitalized with similar symptoms. To avoid conflict, the court awarded custody of Valeria to her father. The decision was made as a precaution, due to the stress of Diana's disappearance. The father and Valeria left town, sparking rumors that the family was hiding something. Diana's friends revealed that running away from home was not unusual for her sisters, especially 16 years old, Valeria. The family dynamics were complex, and arguments between the mother and daughters were common. This information raises a question: if Diana regularly left the house without any problems, why was her mother so worried this time? On August 31st, Diana's parents failed to appear for a press conference, where they were expected to provide an update on the investigation into their daughter's disappearance. According to the family's lawyer, her parents were too distraught to attend, as they were struggling to accept the possibility of never seeing Diana again. An article published in El Mundo on September 11 revealed new information about the family's situation. Contrary to the mother's claims that Diana did not have mental health issues, it was reported that Diana had previously gone missing for 3 days in April. During this time, she had turned off her phone and told her mother that she no longer wanted to live with her. The mother had not contacted the police, which raised concerns about her response to her daughter's behavior. Letters exchanged between Diana and her younger sister Valeria were also made public, shedding light on the emotional struggles both girls were facing. Valeria had been hospitalized multiple times in the past year, including one instance where she had to have her stomach pumped due to an overdose of prescription medication. Prosecutors have launched a new investigation into the alleged abuse of Valeria, the youngest daughter of the family, due to the lack of progress in the case of Diana's disappearance. The investigation into Diana's disappearance is currently in progress and is moving forward quickly. Forensic experts have analyzed several items belonging to Diana, including her toothbrush, comb, computer, diary, and prescription medication. Investigators have also questioned her acquaintances, including a young Moroccan man she had a brief relationship with. Unfortunately, these efforts yielded no results and police searches remained unsuccessful. The police have conducted extensive searches in the surrounding mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes. However, it appears that Diana disappeared at around 3 a.m., and the last signal from her phone was detected in the Tarragon area, 13 miles from her family's location. 72 days after her disappearance, Diana's case remains unresolved. However, police have found the hairband and a cell phone matching the description of Diana's phone. Her father has confirmed that the phone belongs to his daughter. 2 months after Diana went missing, her Facebook profile suddenly became active again. Her friends and family quickly informed the police and provided screenshots. It appeared that the "Remind Password" feature had been used, allowing someone to access her account without knowing her login details. This led to 2 possible explanations: either Diana had forgotten her password and was trying to regain access, or someone else was attempting to break into her account. Diana's phone was a key element in the case, but it did not provide any useful information that could help explain her disappearance. The investigation finally made progress on November 10, 2006, when the driver of the car in which Diana was last seen was identified. The driver had a history of being involved in human trafficking, but this information was kept confidential to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. Initially, he had an alibi for the night of Diana's disappearance, as his wife claimed he was with her, which temporarily cleared him as a suspect. On December 25, 2017, a new piece of information came to light that greatly helped the investigation. A girl was attacked by a man who demanded her phone and threatened her with a weapon. She screamed, and a passing couple intervened, saving her from the assailant who attempted to drag her into his car. The traumatized girl quickly contacted the police, providing a description of the attacker and his vehicle's license plate number. The next day, the police arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abuengay, who had a previous criminal record. Significantly, Jose Enrique was the same individual who had been detained in 2016 on suspicion of kidnapping Diana but was released due to an alibi provided by his wife. Police re-questioned Jose Enrique and his wife. Following the interrogation, the wife admitted that her initial alibi had been false, and in reality, Jose Enrique was away from their home on the night Diana disappeared and did not return until 4 a.m. Jose Enrique initially claimed that he had accidentally hit Diana with his car and, fearing discovery and imprisonment, he had dumped her body. However, he later changed his story, confessing to kidnapping and murdering her. According to Jose Enrique's new testimony, he went to the beach to look for gasoline from abandoned cars, and that's where he met Diana. The confession of Jose Enrique reveals shocking and disturbing information. He kidnapped Diana, attempted to force her into a sexual act, and ultimately strangled her. This shocking confession sheds light on the case, confirming that Diana's disappearance was a heinous crime. The disappearance of Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal has been a traumatic and lengthy case for her family and those following her case. The investigation lasted 494 days, and was heavily covered by the media, with many unfounded and damaging rumors about her parents, causing them great distress and making the investigation more difficult. Despite these challenges, investigators persisted and eventually gathered enough evidence to identify the perpetrator. Diana's loved ones remember her as a beautiful, energetic young woman whose short life was unfortunately ended after an encounter with a violent man. Although Jose Enrique initially withheld information about Diana's whereabouts, he eventually revealed the location of her body, allowing her family and friends to hold a proper burial in January 2018. Her body was discovered in the well of an abandoned warehouse. The perpetrator, Jose Enrique, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Smith family. George Smith was born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut. He came from a close-knit, caring family, an environment that nurtured his intelligence. His father, George Smith Sr., owned the liquor store in the town, which was not just a job, but a passion that brought him joy. George Smith pursued higher education in business at Babson College in Massachusetts and graduated in 2000. After completing his studies, he worked in Boston as a data mining analyst for several years. However, he realized that his true passion was helping his family in the business. In 2005, George made the conscious decision to return home to learn the basics of business from his family's store. His goal was to one day take over the business, allowing his parents to retire and enjoy the fruits of their labor. In 2002, at a reunion with old friends, George Smith met Jennifer. She, a Connecticut native who had just found work as an elementary school teacher, would later become his life partner. George was immediately attracted to her beautiful appearance, open personality, and strong ambition, and they quickly fell deeply in love. George's parents also welcomed Jennifer with open arms. 3 years later, in 2005, when George was 26, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. Their picturesque wedding ceremony was held right on the beach at the Castle Hill Inn, Newport, Rhode Island. Nai sao bui lu, cap doi moi koi de ten hong tuan trang mat xa hoa kio de 12 gay tren du Thuyen Royal Caribbean. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29, with stops in France's Côte d'Azur and along Italy's coast. On board, George and Jennifer befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Askin from California. Josh Askin, a 20 years old with a great sense of humor, quickly became friends with George. The group had a great time together. On July 1st, when the ship docked off the Italian coast, they decided to spend the day on land. July 4th, they explored the island, wandering through the narrow streets of the old town, swimming in the crystal-clear Aegean Sea, and sampling local cuisine in quaint taverns. They were carefree and happy, enjoying each other's company and the island's beauty. The group left Mykonos with unforgettable memories and planned to continue the fun on the ship's deck that evening. After a romantic dinner, George and Jennifer rejoined their friends on the ship. The group decided to get together and enjoy a good time together, laugh and create memories of their vacation. The evening was filled with laughter and excitement. After enjoying appetizers and drinks, the newlyweds, accompanied by Josh Askin, headed to the ship Ciaschino to continue the fun. George and Josh Askin spent their evening enjoying a game of craps, while Jennifer had fun playing poker at a nearby table. As the night came to a close, the newlyweds had lost a substantial amount of money, but they joked about it lightheartedly, unbothered by their losses. After the Ciaschino closed, they decided to keep the party going. Later, around 2:30 a.m. on June 5, 2005, security cameras on the Greek island of Mykonos caught footage of George leaving the Ciaschino, but it remains unclear whether he returned to his cabin afterwards. George Smith, a 26-year-old newlywed, is on his honeymoon with his wife Jennifer. They is having a fantastic time together, soaking up the lively atmosphere and entertainment on board. However, their enjoyable evening suddenly takes a mysterious turn. Upon investigating the incident, the ship's captain searched George's cabin, finding unusual footprints under the window, as well as evidence of a disturbance on deck. George was missing, and footprints at the scene suggested there may have been a struggle, raising doubts about George's safety. The sudden disappearance of the newlywed couple spread quickly, causing passengers on the ship to become worried and scared. The crew cordoned off Deck 7 and restricted access to cabins while they searched for George and Jennifer. After finding blood, it was presumed that they had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The senior officer took charge of the investigation and went to their stateroom to gather more information. Based on the evidence, it was suspected that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for they continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in a ship spa, where she was receiving a pre-booked massage. She looked surprised and worried, claiming she had no idea where her husband was and hadn't seen him since the previous night. According to Jennifer, she woke up and found George not there, but she thought he was with friends or in another cabin. She then went to her spa appointment without giving his absence the second thought. At noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate the disappearance of George. The captain reassured passengers that the investigation was necessary to understand what happened and hoped it would end quickly. The police began by questioning George's wife, Jennifer, who was visibly agitated and seemed to have limited information about her husband's disappearance. Jennifer told the police that she had last seen George the previous night and that Royal Caribbean staff had informed her that he may have fallen overboard. The discovery of blood on the boat's awning suggests that something terrible has happened to George. As a result, Jennifer became the main suspect due to her agitated state and apparent lack of knowledge about her husband's disappearance. The investigators then examined cabin 962, which was found to be in disarray, suggesting a possible struggle. In the bathroom, they discovered small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Furthermore, 2 small blood stains, each approximately 2 centimeters long, were found on the bedding. The blood samples were later identified as belonging to George. George's disappearance from the cabin remains a mystery, and all evidence points to the fact that he experienced trauma before he disappeared. A chair on the balcony, positioned to allow someone to sit next to the railing, caught the investigators' attention. Marks on the railing suggested someone had indeed sat there, sparking suspicion that George might have fallen. However, the high railing and bloodstains on the boat's awning and inside the cabin hinted at a more sinister scenario: murder. Investigators have been trying to determine who George was with that night, and what may have led to his disappearance. The inquiry was in its early stages, but it was already clear that the case was complex and fraught with mysteries. The Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance. They began by questioning the group of friends with whom the newlyweds had spent the previous night. As the investigation remained shrouded in mystery, every detail was crucial. They reported that George and Jennifer had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to George's intoxication. They claimed to have helped him back to the cabin, put him to bed, and removed his shoes before leaving him alone. However, they were unable to account for Jennifer's whereabouts and assumed she had returned to the cabin later. Notably, Josh Askin's testimony contained inconsistencies. He alleged that Jennifer had left the group to go with a casino employee named Lloyd, contradicting the assumption that she had returned to the cabin. Josh Askin and Jennifer have deep feelings for each other, and they have both openly expressed their feelings for George. However, when reviewing the security footage, the story is different. At 3:30 a.m., the footage showed Jennifer leaving with new friends, while George stayed behind. Furthermore, data from Lloyd's key card indicated that he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., a fact confirmed by his girlfriend. This new information raised more questions and led investigators to suspect that Josh Askin may have been hiding some crucial details. As the investigation continues, each new revelation added more mystery to the story. On a different part of the ship, a young man named Greg Rosenberg was enjoying a family cruise with friends, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and close friend Rostislav Kaufman. The three men, who all held American passports despite their Russian heritage, lived in New York City. Greg Rosenberg and Jennifer had started their evening at the casino, trying their luck at poker together. After the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., they joined their friends and decided to continue the party. The group headed to the ship's disco, where they danced and drank together, enjoying each other's company. Lloyd Bota, the casino manager, was also seen having a good time with the young men. The witnesses' accounts of the nighttime activities start to conflict with one another as the group members disperse to their cabins. It was already late, and they were visibly intoxicated. According to the ship's rules, passengers who were loud and behaved inappropriately would have their drink delivery blocked. When the staff refused to serve they drunk visitors, they remembered they had a bottle of absinthe they had bought on the island of Mykonos. However, the crew had forbidden passengers from consuming their own alcohol on board. Josh Askin returned to his cabin to retrieve a special bottle of wormwood wine that he said he had purchased earlier. It was later discovered that this absinthe was exceptionally strong, with an alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decided to help his friend by hiding the bottle of absinthe in his shorts. However, an observant janitor noticed something unusual. A group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh Askin, and George, were drinking from the bottle. This incident was added to the investigation. That evening, not only the men were intoxicated. Jennifer, at first very alert and calm, then showed signs of intoxication. She began to stagger and at one point, leaned on Lloyd, the casino manager. Some thought she was trying to regain her balance, while others interpreted it as flirting. What happened next between Jennifer and George remains unclear. According to eyewitness accounts, they got into an argument, but it's unknown if they were joking or serious. At some point, Jennifer hit George, and it's unclear if it was playful or out of anger. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling. George stayed behind with his new friends. The staff's testimony was crucial in uncovering what happened next. Jennifer's unsteady walk caught the attention of the janitor, who had seen her and her friends drinking earlier. He helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, this is where the story takes a confusing turn. Her stateroom was on the left, but she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was found asleep in a hallway far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock read 4:52 a.m. But her husband George was not there. The curtains on the balcony doors were closed tightly and remained still despite the breeze, raising questions about whether George had gone out to the balcony on his own after his friends left him in bed. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife were in a neighboring cabin. They were awakened at 4 a.m. by a noise and heard loud sounds coming from George's stateroom, number 9062. Chit Hyman reported the noise to guest services and also yelled through the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. The noise stopped briefly, but then loud talking resumed for about 3 minutes. An argument on the balcony followed, during which someone said, "Good night," repeatedly, as if trying to make people leave. After that, there were sounds of furniture being moved, and finally a loud thud, like something had fallen. Chit Heyman decided to investigate a disturbance and opened the door to find 3 unidentified men. Other passengers also reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the boat's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the eyewitnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 of them were visible when they exited. This raised the question of whether one of them might have stayed inside to search for money from the newlywed couple, who had recently won a significant amount at the casino. The theory of a failed robbery attempt seems plausible, but there are inconsistencies in the alibis of the 3 boys, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav. They claim to have been in another stateroom just minutes after Heyman saw the 3 unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirm that they entered it at 4:05 a.m., but there is no record of them entering the cabin again. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. Another theory suggests that George and Jennifer's drunkenness was not simply due to excessive alcohol consumption. Although they appeared relatively sober when they left the casino at 2:30 a.m., they were unable to return to their cabin on their own by 3:30 a.m., implying possible exposure to illicit substances. This idea is supported by the testimony of other casino visitors, who reported that George and Jennifer openly discussed having large sums of money, possibly from wedding gifts or casino winnings. Estimates of their wealth varied, but all witnesses agreed it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. The fact that George wore an expensive Breitling watch and Jennifer owned a valuable engagement ring further suggested they were wealthy. It's possible that their quarters were targeted by thieves searching for the money they had been boasting about. 2 possible explanations have been proposed for the disappearance of George. The first theory suggests that the kidnapper may have injured George while trying to remove his valuable watch, resulting in bloodstains on the sheet. The second theory focuses on the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. After discovering that the passengers had been drinking and finding footprints on the balcony, the captain suspected that an accidental fall overboard might have occurred during a scuffle. Particular attention has been paid to hallucinations caused by drinking wormwood wine, a beverage containing the active ingredient thujone. However, toxicology experts note that the concentration of thujone plays a crucial role in determining its effects. Importantly, absinthe sold in European countries today is strictly regulated, and the thujone concentration is limited to such a low level that it is incapable of causing hallucinations. The fact that the George actually purchased the wormwood wine in Europe makes it unlikely that it caused the hallucinations, as experts claim that the amount of alcohol required to produce such hallucinations would have to be extremely large. In reality, only black market absinthe with a much higher concentration could potentially cause hallucinations. In the investigation into George Smith's disappearance, the FBI conducted polygraph interviews with Jennifer and Lloyd Bota, and who both passed. However, Joshua Skin failed the polygraph, which may suggest that he is hiding something about George's disappearance. The investigation into George's mysterious death uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a videotape featuring 3 individuals, including Russians, making jokes about an incident. The FBI agents reviewed this tape, and a particular comment made by one of the men, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," suggests a potential connection to George's case. During the investigation in 2009, FBI agents interviewed Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Joshua Skin as witnesses. However, Zach Rosenberg and Joshua Skin declined to provide a direct answer. Their answers remained vague, implying that they did not want to share full details of what happened. Another crucial witness was Greg Rosenberg, who was with the group of men entertaining on the night of the incident. He claimed they ordered food to their cabin that evening, providing a possible alibi for the Russian men. Nevertheless, inconsistencies were found in this statement. However, this information is incorrect. According to the ship's service records, their cabin was blocked from service that day. Staff were also specifically instructed not to serve the group that evening. Greg could not confidently say which passenger in the cabin had ordered food. Witnesses offered differing opinions on the nature of George and Jennifer's relationship, citing various observations and recollections. Greg believed it was challenging to gauge the quality of their relationship due to the group's heavy drinking. According to him, everyone in the group was extremely intoxicated, making it hard to determine the specifics of their interactions. There was a discrepancy in testimony as to whether Greg left the cabin immediately after ordering food. Josh Askin provided information that Greg left the cabin after ordering food. However, Greg denied this statement, saying that he never left. This contradiction complicated the investigation, requiring further investigation to establish the facts. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and the case remains unsolved. Investigators are exploring a potential connection between his death and that of George Smith. The mysterious circumstances surrounding George Smith's appearance have raised significant questions about his background and family. As details emerged, the situation grew increasingly complicated, with the actions of his relatives following the tragedy drawing scrutiny from both the public and law enforcement. The George family persisted in seeking answers and justice regarding George's disappearance. The case was moved from the FBI's Connecticut office to the New York office. The family offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could help identify and bring to justice those responsible for the crime. They also called for a boycott of the shipping company, which they believed was trying to cover up the incident to protect its profits. The incident also strained the relationship between George's parents and his young wife, Jennifer. Her behavior was closely scrutinized and many found her composure suspicious. She said she was acting on the orders of FBI agents, doing exactly as they told her. However, her hesitation to provide more information sparked suspicion. The George family, who were seeking truth and justice, became disheartened when Jennifer agreed to a $1 million settlement offer from the judgment company. This move appeared to them as a betrayal. They felt the Turkish authorities' investigation lacked transparency, and Jennifer seemed too hasty in accepting the offer, fueling their suspicions that she was concealing information and wasn't invested in uncovering the truth. In contrast, Jennifer says she has very few memories of what happened after 2:30 a.m. that night, unaware that the liner's staff had even found her in the corridor and escorted her back to her cabin. This satisfied with the Turkish investigation. The George family to take matters into their own hands by engaging independent forensic scientist Henry Lee to assist them. Henry Lee conducted a series of studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. These studies could have revealed crucial information about the events surrounding George's death and potentially confirmed one of their main theories: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes it unclear whether George's fall was an accident or not. It is possible that a third party pushed him or that he was in a state of insanity and climbed onto a chair before falling. Henry Lee had planned to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the cruise line owner refused to allow it. George's relatives believe that this decision was made to obstruct their efforts to uncover the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations were not made public. Meanwhile, the FBI launched its own investigation, but many of its findings and discoveries were kept secret. The FBI's investigation into George Smith's disappearance focused on 4 young men who spent the night with him, as well as 3 Russians: Greg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the mystery and confusion surrounding the case. Initially, Jennifer was a suspect, but she was eventually cleared of suspicion. The family then increased the amount of their lawsuit against the company and used the payout to secure the release of the investigation's results, including witness statements and other relevant information. Jennifer was left to cherish the memories of George and dedicated herself to charitable work in his honor. She later remarried, continuing to strive to make a positive impact in his memory. The FBI launched an extensive investigation into George Smith's disappearance, but it was ultimately unable to uncover the truth about his fate or recover his body. Due to lack of evidence, the case was eventually closed, and his death was officially classified as an accident. George's family continues to seek answers about the circumstances surrounding his death, and not being able to visit his grave and pay their respects is the greatest suffering for them. They remain hopeful that the truth will eventually come to light, bringing closure to the case. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat, the case of John Thomas McGuire. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure were two sisters who lived in an orphanage. Living in an orphanage can be extremely challenging. You don't have a place of your own or time to yourself, and if you're unable to stand up for yourself, you're at risk of being bullied by kids who have been there longer. Typically, bullies target children who are loners. Sisters Amanda and Anna Marie McClure were luckier than most because they can always protect each other. They feel comfortable being around each other and don't try to make friends with anyone. Unfortunately for Anna Marie and Anna Marie, their family secret is about to be revealed. Their father, Larry, has been convicted and imprisoned, and this news has been widely broadcast on television by various news sources. One day, the McClure sisters, Amanda and Anna Marie, helped a new girl named Meredith who was being bullied. Meredith had been living with her mother, who was addicted to drugs. After her mother's death from an overdose, Meredith was too afraid to call for help and stayed with her mother's body for a few days. It wasn't until a friend visited and found her mother's body that emergency services were called. Meredith soon became friends with the McClure sisters, and the three of them had a lot of fun together. Amanda and Anna Marie never told anyone why they were living in an orphanage. And when Meredith asked, Anna Marie made up a story about their father being a police officer who died while on duty to catch a dangerous criminal. Meredith was so impressed with Anna Marie's story that she told it to the other children at the camp. Overnight, the McClure sisters became heroes and were admired by everyone. Most of the kids in the shelter had parents who had died from substance abuse or were in prison, so the McClure sisters' story made them stand out in a positive way. The sisters' secluded life at the orphanage came to an end when all the children wanted to befriend them. However, this marked the beginning of a difficult period in their lives. A heartbreaking truth comes to light: their father, presumed dead, is actually alive and serving a prison sentence for violence and sex crimes he committed against minors. The sisters' lives became a nightmare. However, they got a second chance when two different families decided to adopt them. This meant they would be living apart, and their bond was eventually broken. Amanda, who had previously worried her adoptive parents. They were worried that she would be single forever, and that not having a biological family had a profound effect on her mental health. Amanda's adoptive parents were relieved to learn that she was in a serious relationship with a man named John Thomas McGuire, who was 38 years old. This would be his second marriage, and he had 2 sons from a previous marriage. What reassured them even more was that John seemed to be a perfect partner and always supported her. He also had a friendly relationship with his ex-wife, which was a good sign for Amanda's future with him. After serving his sentence, Larry McClure was pardoned and settled in Virginia. His first priority was to find his daughters. He went straight to Amanda's foster parents, Glenn and Alex, said hello and introduced himself. He asked to see Amanda and requested her contact information, including her address and phone number. Although Larry appeared disheveled and intimidating, with deep wrinkles and dark circles under his eyes, he didn't seem intoxicated. However, his behavior was not quite right. Glenn, Amanda's foster parent, refused Larry's request but promised to inform Amanda that her biological father was looking for her. Larry was taken aback by the term biological father, but he thanked Glenn and left. Glenn did keep his promise. He told Amanda that her father was free and was looking for her. Amanda was torn, with a part of her wanting to reject her father, given his past mistakes, and another part wanting to give him another chance. Amanda reaches out to her father, Larry, after many years of separation. Amanda initiates the conversation by calling her father, who is overjoyed to hear from her. Larry asks about her well-being, and she shares that she's doing well, married, and happy. Larry was very happy for his daughter and invited her and her husband to have dinner with him. Amanda is initially uncertain about meeting her father, but he senses her hesitation and reassures her by telling her to forget the old grudges, and he has lived all these years with only one thought: to see her and Marie. This suggests that Larry has been thinking about his daughters and wants to see them again. Larry's meetings with Amanda and John led to their introduction to the world of illegal substances, which he manufactured himself in his camper. Initially, their financial situation was stable, but Larry manipulated them into funding his substance production. As their addiction deepened, they both lost their jobs. Larry persuaded John to register as a drug addict to receive $180 in state assistance. However, this amount was insufficient to support their habit, and Larry continued to exploit them for money. Meanwhile, Larry met Anna Marie and repeated the same pattern, getting her hooked on substances and taking her money. Amanda and John's situation spiraled out of control. They accumulated huge debts, lost their house, and were forced to move into Larry's camper. John's parents, who were unaware of the situation, were told that they was going on a trip together. In reality, Amanda and John had become entrenched in a cycle of substance abuse and alcohol consumption with Larry, and John's parents have never heard from their son since. On Valentine's Day, John, still reeling from the effects of substance abuse, planned a romantic evening for his wife Amanda at the family circle. He cooked a fancy dinner, inviting Larry and Anna Marie to join them. However, under the prolonged influence of the drugs, a disturbing situation unfolded. Amanda and Larry, who were supposed to be father and daughter, began to develop an inappropriately close relationship. Sadly, John was unaware of this, and as a result, he became redundant in their twisted relationship. During the meal, John spoke very many warm words to Amanda, which made Larry extremely anxious. As the tension increased, Larry interrupted John's speech and asked if he could be completely honest with his wife. John agreed, and Larry suggested a game. They tied John's legs and instructed him to answer truthfully about his life. Initially, the questions covering topics like childhood and school. However, under the influence of drugs, Larry began to accuse John of being an undercover FBI agent. When John denied this, they hit him. Although John begging for mercy, but he was ultimately struck on the head with a bottle of wine, the same wine he had brought for the family dinner. Over the course of 2 days, Larry, Amanda, and Anna Marie subjected John to torture while using illegal substances. When they thought it was time to end things, Amanda put a black bag over John's head and tightened it around his neck until he stopped breathing. They buried John in the backyard and then celebrated the engagement of Larry and Amanda, father and daughter, with more drugs and alcohol. On the 3rd day, their mental health worsened. They began to hallucinate, seeing John's ghost, hearing police sirens, and imagining that the ground where they buried John was disturbed as if he might escape and report everything to the authorities. The situation was chaotic, but the father and daughters still decided to take more drastic action. They dug up John's body, checked his pulse, and examined his pupil's reaction to light, even though he showed clear signs of decomposition. This, however, did not convince them that he was truly gone. In a frantic bid to prevent John from coming back to life, they dismembered his body with a wood axe and drove aspen stakes into each piece. They then buried the remains in different locations and covered them with lime to accelerate the decomposition process. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda got married. To conceal their relationship, Larry changed his name. The new family aimed to start afresh, moving to Kentucky. They promised each other to stop using illegal substances for good. To avoid suspicion, they even hung an American flag over their front door, just like their neighbors did. By this time, John's ex-wife and parents were becoming increasingly concerned about his lack of contact. In 2019, John's mother even filed a police report regarding his disappearance. Meanwhile, Larry failed to inform the police about his move to another state, which violated his probation terms and led to his return to prison. Larry's mental state deteriorated, especially after long-term substance abuse and alcohol use. This sent him into rehab, leading to anxiety and confusion between what was real and what wasn't, reflected in his disturbing behavior. Larry suspected that the parole violation was merely a pretext for authorities to search his backyard for John's remains. He felt an urgent need to contact Amanda or Anna Marie and instruct them to dig up the body parts and rebury them far from their home. Since all prisoner calls are monitored, he had to find a discreet way to communicate this information. Larry meticulously prepared a speech to convey his message, but ultimately, he was denied the opportunity to make calls. Unable to cope with the situation any longer, he decided to confess to the police. Larry thought that if he confessed to the murder before being charged, he might avoid the death penalty. He even considered blaming his daughters to make his situation better. However, the police officer did not believe him. First of all, what murder? What body parts were buried in the backyard? What crazy idea did this man have? Legally, they had to verify his claims. Initially, the police planned to conduct an investigation. They took his statement, and they found out that John was indeed missing. A police unit was sent to Larry's house. First on the scene, investigators found evidence that Larry had mentioned, confirming all of the criminal's statements. The McClure sisters were quickly apprehended. Amanda and Anna Marie were in shock, unable to believe that their father and stepfather could confess to such a brutal murder. They were even more stunned to learn that Larry was trying to portray himself as an innocent bystander, claiming in his testimony that it was his daughters who killed John, and he was just unwittingly involved in the crime. As the investigation unfolded, each the family McClure member sought to protect themselves and convinced the police that their involvement was purely accidental. This situation was particularly difficult for John's relatives because there was no body, only remains were found. Those remains had to be carefully collected by forensic experts, transported to his parents, and ultimately buried in a closed coffin. It has been mentioned many that John was a kind person. Despite the challenges they faced, his parents were able to arrange for his burial. Some friends contributed financially, while others assisted with transportation and funeral planning. John was laid to rest at a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15, the day after Valentine's Day, a member of the McClure family posted on Facebook, claiming it was a message from John. The post stated that he was going on a long trip and would be out of touch, asking friends not to worry about his absence. This raised suspicions that the family McClure had planned to kill John, and they wanted to deceive others to avoid causing panic. Despite the severity of the crime, but during the trial, Larry and Amanda received an additional 6 months in their sentence due to their illegal father-daughter marriage, which is prohibited in the state. The trial began, and Larry testified. He revealed that he had always felt remorse for his children throughout his life. He explained that when they were very young, he committed a serious crime that led to them being placed in an orphanage. Their birth mother had abandoned them, and he was the only one left feeling heartbroken. Larry expressed deep gratitude towards the families who adopted his children, mentioning that he had even prayed for their adoptive parents in churches. He desperately wanted to make up for the years gone by with them and admitted that this might be why he made the choices he did. He describes John as a wonderful young man and expresses his grief for him. He says that if he could change the past, he would, but emphasizes that no one can bring the dead back to life. He mentions his deep love for his daughter Amanda. However, he notes that Amanda does not care about John, her only concern is taking money from his account. He questions whether anyone would consider killing someone for $180, and that people should recognize Amanda for what she was. He called her a monster, not a human. He stated that he, Amanda and Marie, were addicted to drugs and that they deserved to be punished for their actions. He expressed his desire to speak to the jury and said that regardless of his sentence, he was aware of his health problems and believed that he might not live more than 10 years. He expressed regret for John's passing and again apologized to all of John's loved ones. The trial dragged on because the defendants kept changing their statements about whether they killed John or not. Amanda, unable to bear the long trial, made a deal with investigators. In return, she was assured that she would be charged with involuntary manslaughter at her next trial. Larry then gave another speech. He said, "The four of us bought the ingredients to make illegal drugs. Amanda came to me and shared her wish to get revenge on John. The reality is that John, while high on drugs, assaulted Anna Marie, which led to her becoming pregnant. For me, I needed to regain my daughter's trust after years apart. I felt I could not refuse their demands. I often blamed myself for what had happened and thought about ending my life. But I wondered, why should I suffer when this crime was committed by them?" After Larry's speech, it was John's family's turn to speak. John's mother cried uncontrollably and could not express her emotions. She expressed, "Even if one day I can forgive the McClure family, I will never forget what they did. I also hope I live long enough to see one of them die before me." Next, John's children spoke, cursing the killers and declaring that they would never forgive them. The judge delivered the final verdict, sentencing Larry McClure to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the sentence for Amanda was revealed, her adoptive parents regretted telling her that her biological father was looking for her. They had always raised her with the freedom to make her own choices, unaware that this freedom could lead to such dire consequences. At the time the verdict was announced, Amanda stated that her father's jealousy was the root cause of the situation. Her adoptive parents pleaded with the judge to consider that Amanda's involvement in the crime was heavily influenced by Larry's negative impact, asserting that she would never have committed such a violent act otherwise. However, the prosecutors argued that the murder was a planned act, suggesting that Amanda and Larry were conspiring to be together as a couple. The initial hearing focused on Amanda, who was sentenced to 40 years. The judge said Amanda could serve only 20 years. During Anna Marie's sentencing, she attempted to speak out against John's murder. However, she felt pressured by her father and sister to do what they wanted, and she only attended Larry and Amanda's wedding out of concern for her own future. Ultimately, Anna Marie was sentenced to 40 years. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Lynn family. Min Lynn and Yun Lin's romance began in the late 1980s when they met at an Australian university. They both came from China and had moved to Australia to further their studies. Min had completed her bachelor's degree and was doing an internship, while Yun participated in a student exchange program. They met each other after meeting accidentally in the university hallway. After graduating, they got married and settled in North Epping, Sydney, where their love continued to grow into a strong, close-knit family. Min and Yun had their first child, Brenda Lynn, in August 1994. She was mostly known as Brenda. Their son, Henry, was born in 1997, and their youngest child, Terry, was born in 2000. At the start of the 2000s, Min and Yun decided to start a business, opening a small newsroom. Through their hard work, it became a successful news agency with a publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lynn family's business success had brought them economic security. A spacious house, a luxury car, and good education for their children. Min had handled business affairs, while Yun had focused on taking care of their home and children. Neighbors had respected the Lynn family for their hard work and kindness. As parents, Min and Yun had been appreciated for their care and love for their children. They had never quarreled, their children had been very obedient and close-knit. Brenda, the eldest daughter, had stood out for her beauty, good academic performance, and kindness towards animals. Henry and Terry, two sons, had been both active and loved sports, especially soccer. As the Lynn family had settled into life in Australia and their assets had increased, they had begun bringing relatives from China to live with them. In the early 2000s, Min's parents had been the first to move to North Epping and had helped with childcare. A few years later, Yun's parents also moved to Sydney suburb, with Min and Yun buying them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lynn family, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lynn family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. In late 2007, Min Lynn's younger sister, Kathy, and her husband, Robert, moved to Australia in search of better opportunities. They had visited before and briefly lived in Melbourne but had returned to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert was a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. He and his wife invested all their savings in a restaurant in Sydney, but the business struggled and eventually closed. Robert's subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed due to his lack of business skills and financial management experience. Lynn's family had a habit of meeting every Friday night. Their last family gathering took place on July 17, 2009, at Kathy and Min's parents' home. The next morning, July 18, the Lynn family's store had not been open, making longtime customers feel surprised and confused. This sudden closure had raised their concerns. One of them tried to contact Min multiple times but was unsuccessful, so they called Min's sister Kathy to see if she knew what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother never closed the shop without making arrangements first. Kathy tried to call Min and Yun, but they didn't answer. She also tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert were worried, so they decided to visit Min's house to make sure everything was okay. They arrived around 9 a.m. and saw the family car. They went to the house. The front door was unlocked, but there was no sign of Min or his family inside. Kathy went upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, she was shocked by what she saw. The room was covered in blood, including the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yun Lynn's body was on the floor near the bed, and she had been severely mutilated. Kathy screamed and stumbled backward, was shocked by the gruesome scene. In the room next to where Irene slept, a terrible scene took place. Irene lay motionless on the bed, her face beaten and bruised. The bedrooms of Henry, 12, and Terry, 9, also revealed horrifying scenes. Both were brutally beaten to death. Their bodies were found in separate corners of the room. Min Lynn's body was found in his bedroom, covered with a blanket soaked in blood. He was killed in the same way as his family. It seems he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and then the two boys. Kathy immediately contacted emergency services. After Kathy's urgent call, Robert left to fetch the Lynn's parents, who lived about 10 kilometers from the crime scene. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, encountering what they described as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had witnessed. Tragically, the Lynn family members were all killed. Each person died from multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object similar to a hammer. However, the crime weapon was not found at the scene. The initial examination of the crime scene did not reveal any important clues. The killer did not leave the murder weapon behind, and they did not take any valuables or money. This suggests that the main goal was to kill the Lynn family, not to steal from them. At first, investigators thought there might be multiple attackers because it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower so many people. However, evidence showed that the children were awake during the attack and tried to escape. There were blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Oddly, all adult victims had head injuries and showed signs of strangulation. Investigators found identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a tread pattern. Although they could not identify the shoe brand, they determined the shoe size. No fingerprints were found, suggesting the killers wore gloves. Initially, the police had no leads or theories about the perpetrator's identity. Friends and neighbors of the Lynn family all said that the family had no known enemies, making the motive for the brutal massacre unclear. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lynn, the eldest child and now sole survivor of the Lynn family, was attending school in New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She learned about the incident through social media and initially did not believe it was related to her family, but the truth devastated her. Brenda soon received a call from her Aunt Kathy, who tearfully confirmed the devastating news. Brenda was immediately flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert met her at the airport. She then moved in with them, as her family's home was closed off as a crime scene. The following day, Brenda was taken to the police station, overcome with grief, to be questioned. However, she had no new information to share, stressing that her family had no enemies and hadn't noticed anything unusual before her trip. After her family's passing, Brenda inherited a significant fortune, including property and the family business. Since she was still a minor and in school, her guardians, Kathy and Robert, took on the responsibility of managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her caregivers. Robert even threatened to take legal action if the grandparents sought custody, claiming they were too old to care for a teenager. The matter was eventually resolved, with Brenda remaining in the care of her aunt and uncle. The Lynn's shop and publishing business reopened under new management after a temporary closure. However, Brenda had not yet taken over the business operations. Robert began reviewing the family's financial records, including bank accounts, savings, and real estate. Beside that, experts thoroughly investigated the crime scene, documenting every detail, but no concrete leads were found. They believed the killer acted alone and entered the house quietly, possibly through and with a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinctive tread pattern and likely used a hammer as the lethal weapon, which was never found. The killer wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints or foreign DNA behind. One notable detail was the presence of blood stains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the killings occurred, indicating the killer's bloodied gloves had touched them. However, there were no blood stains on Brenda's room doorknob, suggesting the killer knew she was not present. The Lynn family tragedy received extensive media coverage. However, with no concrete evidence or suspects, numerous implausible theories surfaced. Speculation about the family's supposed vast wealth leading to their murder. As the investigation had stalled, no suspects had emerged for the probe. The theory of a robbery had eventually been abandoned because the killer had left money and valuables intact, suggesting the sole motive had been to kill family members. Furthermore, The fact that the house had lost power on the night of the murder suggested that the murderer had been someone who was familiar with the location of the electrical panel. The attacker's ability to control the house in darkness showed that he had prior knowledge of the house's layout. When reviewing the case, an investigator replayed Kathy's emergency call looking for missed clues. An important hint was detected in the recording. The recording captured Kathy's frantic attempts to explain the situation, her words interrupted by crying and sobbing. At the end of the call, Kathy mentioned her husband's name and talked to him in Cantonese. This piqued the investigators' interest, causing them to translate her words. The translation revealed that Kathy was pleading with Robert not to leave Kathy home alone. This was significant since Robert had left Kathy at the scene of the crime to pick up her parents, despite the potential danger. With 5 people brutally murdered and the killer possibly still inside, Robert's calm aroused suspicion, as if he already knew for certain that Kathy was safe. The police finally identified Robert as the main suspect. A crucial discovery was that Robert had a key to Min's house, which had been given to Robert shortly before the tragedy. However, Robert never mentioned this during questioning, and his wife Kathy was unaware that Min had given him the key. It was Brenda who unintentionally revealed this important information to investigators. Further investigation showed that Robert's claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor was false. Although he had a medical degree, he had never had a stable job in the field. There were rumors that he had fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish a successful career and wasted his remaining savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became idle, relying on his wife's income. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lynn family's estate. His first move was to force Yun's parents out of their home, which Min had bought for them. Although the house remained in Min's name, Min and Kathy's parents were still allowed to stay in their own home that was also purchased for them. Based on this information, investigators suspected he had a long-standing plot to usurp Min family property, money, and profitable business. However, the police could not arrest Robert yet due to a lack of concrete evidence. Through a combination of interrogation, surveillance, and other methods, the investigation team was granted permission to install hidden cameras in the Robert household. They hoped to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unexpected revelation from Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned Robert's preference for a specific brand of shoes. A few years ago, Robert bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers that he really liked. He had worn out one pair and thrown it away, but kept the other pair at home. What's important to note is that Robert's shoe size, 9.5, matched the size of the shoes worn by the killers. The crucial evidence was caught on a hidden camera, which showed Robert deliberately destroying the box that held the remaining pair of shoes. A search warrant was issued for Robert's home. During the search, police found a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers with the same pattern as the pattern collected at the crime scene. In the garage, they discovered a small bloodstain, which was later confirmed by a forensic examiner to be a bloodstain containing DNA from all 5 victims of the Lynn family, linking it to the crime scene. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, Robert was officially arrested. He denied involvement, claiming the blood stains in his garage appeared after returning from Lynn's house following the tragedy. He also downplayed the importance of the sneakers, saying they were new and he threw away the old shoes. While in prison awaiting trial, Robert shared a cell with a number of informants whom the police had arranged. During a conversation, he confessed to carefully planning the crime and covering his tracks. He bought the weapon in a store without surveillance cameras and gave his wife tea so she wouldn't wake up while he was committing the crime. He removed the hammer, shoes, gloves, and clothes so police would never find them. At trial, Robert denied everything. The only evidence against him is what the informant said and some indirectly clues. The jury failed to find Robert guilty and he was released on bail in December 2015. But when the trial resumed in June 2016, another informant said Robert had confessed to being haunted by Brenda since she was 13 years old. Brenda was questioned again and tearfully said Robert forced her to have sex when she first moved in. She kept silent about the abuse for years because she was afraid of what Robert might do. With this new information and other evidence, Robert was officially convicted of all charges. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each murder. All of his appeals were rejected. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheil Coughlin. Sheil Coughlin grew up on the west side of Manhattan. Shelley's life was marked by a love of learning and academic excellence, earning a degree in wealth management. This degree opened the door to a successful career in Swiss banking. Sheil's career flourished, and she became skilled at managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for her clients. However, despite her professional success and financial security, Sheil felt unfulfilled. She longed to start a family of her own and become a mother. In an effort to change her circumstances, Sheil attended a Jewish singles event in February 1998, where she met a 26-year-old man named Rod Coughlin, who also worked in the banking sector. Sheil and Rod were a young couple with many similar interests and ambitions. Their relationship developed quickly despite their significant age difference. They spent all their time together and then decided to get married, feeling that everything was just right. Some people thought they were rushing into marriage, but for Sheil and Rod, it was perfect. They had 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and their family was complete. However, their happy life was shattered on New Year's Eve 2009 when Sheil died in a tragic accident. At first, the police thought it was just a freak accident. On December 30, 2009, 2 police officers were finishing their night shift at a Manhattan police station. They received an emergency call from Rod Coughlin, Sheil's husband, who had called in a panic to report that he had found Sheil in her bathtub, submerged in blood, and that she was dead. He followed the police's instructions to pull her out of the water and attempt to resuscitate her. However, it soon became clear that his efforts to save her life would not be successful. As Sheil's body was cold and motionless, Rod Coughlin covered her with a blanket and waited for the police to arrive. Police quickly arrived and investigated the scene. Upon arrival, they assessed the situation and blocked off a downtown Manhattan street. Initially, officers suspected that Sheil's death may have been a suicide. Inside the apartment, the police found scattered children's toys. Proceeding to the bathroom, they discovered the Sheil wrapped in a blanket by her husband. The bloody water in the tub and the wet floor indicated that Rod Coughlin had recently pulled the body from the water. A bleeding wound on the back of Sheil's head was visible. Police found a torn hinge on the cabinet in the bathroom where Sheil died, suggesting she fell after losing her grip on the doorknob. Experts concluded there was no forced entry after checking around the house. The detective working the case decided to talk to the family members. During the interview, it was discovered that Sheil and Rod Coughlin's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body. Traumatized and shocked by what she saw, she told the police what had happened. It turned out that the night before, she and her younger brother had slept in their mother's bed. Waking up in the middle of the night and realizing that her mother was not there, she went looking for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. She quickly called her father, Rod Coughlin, who had recently separated from his mother and was downstairs. He rushed into the bathroom, pulled his wife's body out of the water, and called emergency services. Her account of the events matched Rod Coughlin's, supporting the theory that her death was an accident. The police informed Sheil's family of the tragic event, leaving everyone in shock. An autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the following day. When the medical examiner contacted investigators to begin the examination, he was surprised to learn that this procedure would not take place, despite being necessary. This left the examiner confused. It was later discovered that a rabbi from Shields synagogue had intervened. The rabbi contacted an organization responsible for burying Orthodox Jews, who then asked the police for permission to enter the scene in accordance with the family's religious rites. The police granted permission and a team of rabbis arrived at the scene. They cleaned up the blood in the bathtub and prepared Shields' body for burial in accordance with the family's beliefs. Unfortunately, this process destroyed all evidence and clues before they could be examined by the police forensic department. Orthodox Jewish tradition considers autopsies unacceptable because they involve defiling the body of the deceased. The rabbi quickly stepped in to support Shields' grieving family, who were grateful for the rabbi's help. As a result, the family agreed to forego an autopsy and organize funeral arrangements. Shields was buried within 24 hours, with hundreds of people attending to pay their respects. Shields' parents questioned the cause of Shields' death. Police told them that potential evidence had been destroyed during the cleanup. They thought that a fall in the bathtub would certainly have caused the accident. But the possibility of death from such an accident seemed unlikely. The family hired a private investigator to investigate the circumstances of her death and determine whether it was indeed an accident. The private investigator begins by going to the family home to talk to Shields' relatives, and learns that Shields' marriage to Rod Coughlin is having major problems. Their marriage began to fall apart after their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008. Rod Coughlin frequently changed jobs and developed a gambling addiction, spending a lot of money on gambling. Shields felt neglected because Rod Coughlin spent a lot of time playing video games. Shields was also frustrated by the amount of money Rod Coughlin's family spent on his frequent trips, and he was unfaithful to her. Shields, after discovering his email cheating, she decided to end their marriage and began the process of getting a religious divorce. However, the formal divorce process will take some time to complete. Although they are separated and experiencing strain in their relationship, they has tried to maintain their relationship for the sake of their children. Despite this effort, conflicts and disagreements between Shields and Rod Coughlin continued to arise. Shields had recently confided in her loved ones about her grievances with Rod Coughlin, characterizing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt uneasy and monitored. The private detective suspected that Rod Coughlin might have been involved in his wife Shields' death due to the complexities in their marital life. To investigate further, the detective aimed to determine if a crime had occurred at the scene where Shields' body was found. He planned to inspect her apartment, but the door was sealed, requiring him to obtain a court order to gain access. Upon arriving at the scene with New York police officers, the detective attempted to unlock the door with a provided key, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, Rod Coughlin appeared from his apartment, claiming he had heard a noise and came to investigate. When questioned by the police and the detective, Rod Coughlin took the key and easily opened the door. This raised suspicions. Had Rod Coughlin genuinely heard a noise, or was he deliberately keeping an eye on the situation? The detective searched the apartment for evidence of murder. Shields' family said she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. A phone charger was found, but not the phone that he paid particular attention to the hinges, which investigators believed she had ripped off during a fall. The more he examined them, the more he suspected that, with Shields' strength, ripping off hinges that were firmly attached to the cabinet was impossible. The detective discussed his findings with the police, trying to convince them that Shields' death was not an accident, but a murder. However, the police remained unconvinced, citing a lack of evidence. Therefore, they decided to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. This decision caused a difficult debate with Shields' family. The exhumation took place 2 weeks after Sheil had been buried. Her loved ones were deeply distressed by the decision. In the Jewish faith, exhumation is considered negative and many religious leaders oppose the practice. The family needed time to think about their next steps. They felt the need to find out the truth about their daughter's death, so they agreed to exhume her body. However, the exhumation process was difficult, so the family had to apply for a special order from the prosecutor's office. Even with the family's consent, they still had to make sure that all the necessary paperwork was completed. Once all the paperwork was completed, they proceeded with the exhumation and autopsy. The autopsy results showed that Sheil did not die from a fall, but from strangulation, which caused her to suffocate and break her neck. The official cause of Sheil's death was revised, and it was no longer considered an accident. Instead, it was officially ruled a murder. The detective's suspicions and efforts were vindicated. The autopsy results were instrumental in prompting the New York Police Department to reopen the investigation into Sheil's death. Detectives began scrutinizing new evidence, including phone records and bank statements. They also interviewed everyone who had interacted with Rod Coughlin and Sheil. The attorney shared information about Rod Coughlin and Sheil during the first divorce hearing in May 2009. Rod Coughlin claimed that he could not afford the money because he was unemployed, but the judge said that he had to give up gambling and electronics. In court, Rod Coughlin's true nature was exposed, and he continued to criticize Sheil, making false accusations about her lifestyle, finances, and behavior toward their son. He even called Sheil's workplace to defame her. In the subsequent divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, the court banned Rod Coughlin from spending time alone with the children, a ban that remained in place even after Sheil's death. The court also denied Rod Coughlin custody of the children and awarded custody to Rod Coughlin's parents through a social worker. This decision likely angered Rod Coughlin greatly. Police interviewed a former caregiver who had cared for Rod Coughlin's children before he fired her. It was discovered that on December 30th, Sheil had received an expensive keratin hair treatment that cost hundreds of dollars. The care instructions emphasized avoiding humidity in high temperatures for several days, essentially prohibiting baths or showers. Sheil's autopsy revealed no signs of bathing on the day of her death, leading investigators to speculate that she may not have taken a bath. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the building, which showed Rod Coughlin leaving his apartment at 4 a.m. on the day of the murder, dressed to go out. He returned a short time later. The building's security guard found this unusual, as Rod had never left the building that early. The security guard asked Rod Coughlin if he needed anything, but when he said no, Rod Coughlin returned with the chocolate bars and gave them to the security guard. Investigators believe that Rod Coughlin's actions were intentional to create an alibi, and as a result, he became the prime suspect. Sheil and Rod Coughlin were still married, which meant that absent a will or divorce, Rod Coughlin would inherit her estate, which was worth over $5 million. Additionally, on December 31, 2009, Sheil scheduled a meeting with her attorney to update her will and remove Rod Coughlin from the list of beneficiaries, which posed a significant threat to Rod Coughlin's rights and provided a clear motive for the crime. All of Sheil's assets were frozen in a safe deposit account. It is likely that Rod Coughlin knew about Sheil's plans to remove his name from her will, as he may have been monitoring her activities. A review of the surveillance footage revealed that Sheil had returned home at 8 p.m. the night before the crime, talking on her phone. However, the phone had gone missing after the crime. The investigators decided to conduct another search of the crime scene, and upon returning to the apartment, they quickly found Sheil's mobile phone lying on her bedside table, still connected to the charger. When questioned by the police, Rod Coughlin hired a lawyer, Ed, who advised him to remain silent. As a result, investigators had to continue searching for new evidence implicating Rod Coughlin. When they examined Rod Kovlin's phone records, they discovered frequent calls to the number of Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children. 5 months before Shields' murder, Rod Kovlin and Deborah met at a sick bow tournament and began a passionate affair. They often met at sick bow tournaments or played together online. Investigators saw an opportunity to gather information and decided to contact Deborah with a few questions. However, to their surprise, Deborah responded that her attorney had asked her not to cooperate. Faced with Deborah's refusal to speak, the police asked for the name of her attorney. The response revealed that Deborah and Rod Kovlin were the same attorney. As a last resort, the police searched Shields' newly discovered phone for incriminating text messages or electronic communications between Rod and Deborah. All data had been completely erased by a professional. Even skilled programmers were unable to recover the deleted messages. Over time, it became clear that he had succeeded in evading justice. While his crimes may have been well executed, the rabbi's meticulous cleaning of the bathroom was a major factor in hampering the investigation. By removing all traces of blood and other evidence, they destroyed DNA, making it increasingly difficult for investigators to collect evidence. The case stalled because Rod Kovlin confessed to the crime, and a lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years have passed since the investigation into Shields' death began, but no arrests have been made. Police have searched for clues and evidence of Rod Kovlin's involvement in Shields' death for years, but to no avail. However, the case took a turn when Rod Kovlin's mistress, Deborah, came forward. She contacted the police, and they invited her to the station for questioning. Deborah had recently broken up with Rod Kovlin, which prompted her to contact the police. She shared information with the police that Rod Kovlin had conspired to gain custody of the children, but because he was a suspect in Shields' death and did not have custody of the children, he could not access the money Shields left behind. Rod Kovlin hatched a sinister plan to get his hands on Shields' fortune. Rod Kovlin planned to manipulate his 15-year-old daughter into falsely accusing her grandfather, Rod Kovlin's father, of assaulting her. This would result in the grandfather being imprisoned and losing custody of his granddaughter, and Rod Kovlin would give his daughter a large sum of money upon completion of the mission. Meanwhile, Rod Kovlin had been secretly withdrawing funds from the only account he had access to, which was meant for his children's education. His parents discovered that he was misusing the money and were extremely unhappy with his lack of concern for his children's well-being. This led to a heated dispute between Rod Kovlin and his parents. Rod Kovlin's anger towards his parents escalated to the point where he considered harming them. In 2012, he confided in his lover, Deborah, about his plan to have his daughter poison his parents' tea with rat poison. He believed that since his daughter was a minor, she would receive a lighter sentence if caught. Following this, Rod Kovlin came up with several other schemes. He considered burning down his parents' house and trapping them inside by jamming the doors. Rod Kovlin also thought about arranging a fake marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, which would have forced her to give up part of her inheritance to him. The police were shocked by the details of Rod Kovlin's plans. Deborah secretly collected evidence, storing a large amount of data on hard drives. Deborah realized she was dealing with a psychopath, and she waited until after she broke up with Rod Kovlin to share the evidence with the police. The recordings she collected of Rod Kovlin's conversations with various people. The police now had to listen carefully to these recordings to find conclusive evidence. Deborah's contribution to the investigation was crucial. As the investigators analyzed the recordings, they made a surprising discovery. In a conversation with a friend he met through backgammon, Rod Kovlin casually mentioned that he had keys to Shields' apartment and could enter it at any time. Investigators found that Rod Kovlin was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the Shields' demise on her. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Kovlin with the demise of his wife. On November 1, 2015, Rod Coughlin was arrested. Shiel's family awaited the trial of their daughter's perpetrator, but victory was not assured. Rod Coughlin, while incarcerated, shared intimate details of his wife's murder with a fellow inmate. He even reenacted the strangulation, which matched the autopsy results. During the 7-week trial, the jury heard testimony about the heinous crimes he planned to commit, including murdering his wife, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was horrified by his cold-blooded nature. In March 2019, the court convicted Rod Coughlin of murdering his wife, Shiel. Although there was no direct eyewitness, the overwhelming evidence led to a life imprisonment sentence. With the possibility of parole after 25 years, Rod Coughlin will no longer pose a threat to his family or the people of New York.